Chapter 665. Sister, this is brother-in-law, right? Hello, brother-in-law. In Jianghai's eyes, a pure white elf was standing in front of him at this time, looking at him with a smile, looking at her silver white hair, white and tender skin, and that familiar face. Jianghai was completely stunned. Little Ye, you're back. When did you come back? Seeing the girl in front of her, Qili was very excited. She happily hugged the girl in front of her into her arms, and then said while jumping, I just came back a few days ago. Wasn't I in the United States with second sister for treatment? While jumping there with Qili, the girl's eyes were still gently glancing at Jianghai. Seeing her gaze, Jianghai subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This what's going on? Jianghai, let me introduce you. This is my youngest sister, Qia. You should have met her when you were young. This is Jianghai, your brother-in-law. After Qili finished talking to Qia, she turned her gaze to Jianghai and began to introduce the two of them. Hello. Hearing Qili's words, Jianghai was embarrassed. He felt that the air was frozen at this time. What should he say now? Pretend not to know her? He couldn't do it. But if he wanted to say that he knew her, how did he know her? Now Jianghai's mind was blank. He seemed to. Little Ye was here. Then her sister, Bernice, should be Qili's second sister. It seemed that he had inadvertently, probably, some unspeakable secret had happened between him and his two sisters-in-law. Thinking of this, Jianghai couldn't wait to turn around and run away. It's too embarrassing. Jianghai couldn't help but, however, he knew that he couldn't run, so he felt like a machine without oil. It was as if every step he took was very difficult. Is little Jie back too? But fortunately, Qili was immersed in the joy of her sister's return at this time. She looked at Qia and asked her. And second sister is also back, but she went out to buy something now. She will be back in a while. Hearing Qili's words, Qia also said with a smile. Looking at the faint smile on her face, Qili also smiled contentedly. This time their family was finally together. I'll go see Mom first. After saying a few words to Qia, Qili took off her shoes and ran into the house. As for Jianghai, he fell behind. Relax, otherwise it will be exposed. Seeing that Jianghai seemed to be frozen by the air around him, Little Ye, oh no. Qia walked in front of Jianghai and pretended to help Jianghai find slippers. In fact, she whispered in Jianghai's ear. Feeling the air she breathed into his ear, Jianghai was even more at a loss. No matter how much he thought about it, he never thought that it would be such a coincidence that Bernice and Xiaoya were actually Qili's younger sisters. Is there a mistake? Are you really Qili's sister? Seeing that Qia was about to leave after finishing her words, Jianghai immediately grabbed her hand and asked in a low voice. Of course it's the real deal. Haven't you experienced it? Tell me the truth, which of us three sisters is the most comfortable? Looking at Jianghai, Little Ye didn't know if it was because she had suffered a loss or been drenched in the rain. She took the opportunity to whisper in Jianghai's ear. Hearing her words, Jianghai's face turned red. It was the first time that he had heard such shameless words. Let's go in. Looking at Jianghai's appearance, Little Ye also laughed and walked into the room first. Walking into the living room of the villa, he found that Qili was already chatting with her mother. Zheng Xiuyi, whom Jianghai had met before, stood beside them. She was listening to them while preparing tea and snacks. Seeing that Jianghai walked in, Qili's mother couldn't help but stand up and look at Jianghai with a smile. Little Jiang, you're here. Come take a seat. After greeting Jianghai, Qili's mother pulled Jianghai to sit beside her, which made Jianghai more embarrassed. As for Little Ye, she sat beside Jianghai with a smile. Feeling these people around him, Jianghai's body became stiff. Little Jiang, you should know my daughter. This is my younger daughter, Qia. She has been suffering from an annoying disease, albinism, since she was a child. Her second sister is studying medicine, so she has been receiving treatment in the United States. However, unlike Boston, where you live, they live in the southernmost Miami. I haven't seen them for several years. This year, Little Ye's disease has been alleviated, and she can move normally under the sun. So they came back. You're all in the United States. If anything happens to them in the future, you have to help take care of them. Seeing that Jiang Hai and little Ye sat down, Chi Li's mother took Jiang Hai's hand and said earnestly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. How could he take care of them? He had already taken care of them to bed. If he continued to take care of them, would they have to give birth to several babies? Ahem, Mom, look at what you're saying. My brother-in-law is shy. Looking at Jiang Hai's body that couldn't be any stiffer, Chi Ye's heart was still good. She couldn't help but stand up and say something to Chi Li's mother, helping Jiang Hai out of this predicament. Yes, yes, yes. But if you have any problems, you can go to your brother-in-law. Your brother-in-law is very powerful now. After you came back, the delicious beef you ate was brought by your brother-in-law. Hearing her younger daughter's words, Chi Li's mother couldn't help but smile kindly. Then she praised Jiang Hai, which made Jiang Hai a little embarrassed. Obviously, Chi Li's mother knew that Jiang Hai was not the same as before, so she kept praising Jiang Hai. Of course, in fact, Jiang Hai having a promising future was the scene she was most willing to see. If it wasn't for the stability of the beginning, she wouldn't have let her daughter marry Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai was always mud that couldn't support the wall, then she would feel sorry for her daughter. Now that Jiang Hai had some power, he was a good match for her daughter. This was even better. Mom, don't worry. If second sister and third sister have any problems in the United States, Jiang Hai will definitely help. Hearing her mother's words, Chi Li also said with a smile at this time. Hearing this, Jiang Hai, who had nothing to say, lowered his head even more. It was really because he didn't know what he should say at this time. It was really too embarrassing. Fortunately, there was still Zheng Xiaoa who could help Jiang Hai feel embarrassed, because she would pour tea for Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai just focused on fighting with the tea leaves. But drinking too much tea was also a problem. In less than half an hour, Jiang Hai felt that his lower abdomen was a little bloated. He took the initiative to say that, and went to pee. As a result, when he went to the toilet, he thought that it was meaningless to go out so quickly, and listen to the three of them. It was better to stay in the toilet for a while. So he squatted in the toilet for more than 10 minutes, and played a game before coming out. But just as he came out, he saw the door next to him was opened, and then Bernice walked in with a bunch of things. It really is you. When Bernice and Jiang Hai's eyes met, Jiang Hai's last hope was shattered. It really was her. Hey, you are here. Are you happy with this surprise? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice put down the things with a smile and walked over carefully. She glanced at the people in the room and didn't pay attention to them. So she smiled and said to Jiang Hai, there is no surprise, but there is a lot of fright. What should I call you now? Bernice, Qijia, or sister-in-law? Looking at Bernice, Jiang Hai said somewhat speechlessly. He really inadvertently did something that angered people and gods. It's up to you. But when we do that, do you want me to call you husband? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice walked over, gently tapped Jiang Hai's chest with her fingertips, and then said sweetly in Jiang Hai's ear. Before Jiang Hai could react, she had already put her arms around Jiang Hai's neck, and took the initiative to kiss him. Their lips and teeth intertwined. He had to admit that kissing his sister-in-law here was really too embarrassing. Jiang Hai wanted to push her away in a panic, but she grabbed Jiang Hai's hand and pressed it against her upper body. Hey, you are looking for death. After a long time, Jiang Hai looked at Bernice and said with some fear. If this was seen, he couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. Of course the premise was that he was not that clean. Tisk, coward, I'll come to you at night. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jia, who was also Bernice, gave him a stern look, and then walked in with her things with a smile. As for Jiang Hai, he wiped his mouth again. After making sure that there was nothing special on his face, he walked back to the villa's living room. Naturally, after he went in, there was a new round of introductions. Bernice's acting was also good. She pretended that it was the first time she saw Jiang Hai. Indeed, Chia could say that she had seen Jiang Hai when she was young. However, this was the first time Qi Jia had seen Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's awkwardness seemed to have relapsed. Although in this home, Jiang Hai felt particularly awkward, the overall atmosphere was still very good. Everyone was together for the new year. After dinner in the evening, at 8 o'clock, they watched the New Year's gala while making dumplings. Although this year's New Year's gala was really not that good, everyone was more to experience this kind of atmosphere of reunion. By the time the New Year's gala ended, it was already late at night. Except for Jiang Hai, everyone else was a little sleepy, especially Qi Li's mother. Old people were like this. They were sleepy especially early at night, but they also got up early in the morning. Qi Li's mother was like this. After eating the dumplings at 12 o'clock, everyone went back to rest. Jiang Hai naturally lived with Qi Li. After returning to the room, Jiang Hai went to take a shower first, but halfway through, Qi Li walked in. "Sir, do you want me to help you scrub your back?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled and stretched out his hand. Then Qi Li also stepped into the bathtub in the bathroom. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, she directly pounced on him. They didn't scrub his back, but except for his back, they rubbed the other places well. An hour later, Qi Li lay in Jiang Hai's arms like a puddle of mud. Listening to Jiang Hai's strong heartbeat, Qi Li's face was full of a satisfied smile. They had just been crazy for more than 2 hours last night. And now it was late. Qi Li really didn't have much energy. After lying in the bathtub for about 10 minutes, Jiang Hai looked at her fingers that were already wrinkled and took the initiative to pick her up. After wiping her hands clean, he carried her to the bed in the room. As soon as Qi Li touched the bed, she turned over and was about to sleep. "Aren't you thirsty? Do you want some water?" Seeing that Qi Li was about to fall asleep, Jiang Hai couldn't help but push her and ask her. "Well, I'm too sleepy. I'm going to sleep directly. If you're thirsty, then go downstairs and get water. There's some in the refrigerator." Maybe Qi Li was really sleepy. She was too lazy to open her eyes and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but spank her butt. Then he put on his pajamas, left the room, and prepared to go downstairs to the kitchen to get water. But just as he walked to the stairs, a figure suddenly rushed out from the side and grabbed Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai fixed his eyes and found that the person who grabbed him was no one else but Bernice. "Oh, she should be called Qijie now. I've been waiting for you for an hour. You should have done it in the room. This guy really knows how to enjoy himself. Now you're mine." Looking at Jiang Hai's confused expression, Bernice whispered, then pulled Jiang Hai into her room. What happened next didn't need to be said. It was almost 1 o'clock when it was time to go to bed. But when Jiang Hai came out of Qijie's room, it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning. He was really thirsty. After coming out, he didn't go back to sleep directly. He still wanted to go downstairs to get water. But just as he walked to the kitchen, he found that Qijie was in the kitchen at this time. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, she also smiled and then hooked her finger at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also walked over as he wished. But first he took the water and drank the water in the cup. Looking at the charming Qijie in front of him, there was nothing to say. Anyway, it wasn't like they hadn't tried it in the kitchen. Qijie bit her finger and endured the impact of shyness. The battle started again. When he returned to Qi Li's room again, it was already 5 o'clock in the morning. The sky outside was already bright. Jiang Hai was really tired. Doing that kind of thing was actually quite physically exhausting. Holding Qi Li, Jiang Hai slowly fell asleep. Chapter 666. Yawning, Qi Li walked down the stairs in a mess. She glanced at the living room. As expected of the new year, she slept too late last night. At this time in the living room, except for her mother, her 2 sisters were still asleep, and her husband Jiang Hai was still sleeping. Of course, she didn't know what happened last night. "You're up, did you sleep well?" Seeing her daughter coming down, Qi Li's mother, who was sitting on the sofa and watching TV at this time, couldn't help but smile and pat the seat next to her, saying to Qi Li. Hearing her mother's words, Qi Li also rushed over and sat there. "Not bad after all, it's my own home. There's nothing I can't get used to." Looking at her mother with a smile, Qi Li said, "It's just the 2 of us now, so I have something to ask you. You and Jiang Hai have been married for almost 3 years, right?" Looking at Qi Li's appearance, Qi Li's mother also nodded with a smile, but then her face changed, and she looked at Qi Li and asked, "This year is the 3rd year." Thinking about it, Jiang Hai and her got married. In fact, it hasn't been 2 years. But if one were to count the years, it had already been 3 years. Time really flew by in the blink of an eye. I know that you don't like Jiang Hai. Tell me the truth, did you and Jiang Hai that do the things that a husband and wife should do? Looking at Li's mother lowered her voice and asked her. She was really afraid of her daughter, who still maintained a pure relationship with Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Li's face suddenly turned red. This is really not easy to answer. Well, we did that. Although we didn't see each other much, when we met, we would do that. But although her face was very red, she still hesitated and said. Hearing her words, Li's mother also nodded. As long as her daughter accepted Jiang Hai, it was a good thing. Since you and he have done that, what protection do you have? Looking at Li, her mother continued to ask. No, Jiang Hai doesn't like it. Thinking of Jiang Hai's habits, Li couldn't help but secretly snort. Jiang Hai's habits are really not good. That's strange. Why didn't you get pregnant? Hearing Li's words, Li's mother couldn't help but say with some hesitation. Well, it's true, except for when I am not very convenient. We have done it a lot of times, but we really didn't have a baby. Hearing her mother's words, Li couldn't help but say with some doubts. In fact, she originally wanted to say that in addition to her, Jiang Hai actually has a lot of women, and Jiang Hai didn't bring those things, or let them take medicine. Under such circumstances, Jiang Hai actually didn't have a single woman. This is indeed a bit strange. Thinking about it carefully, is there something wrong with Jiang Hai? In the next few days, I will take you to check. See if you can check Jiang Hai's side. Old people are eager to have grandchildren. It has been 3 years, and her daughter's stomach hasn't shown any signs of pregnancy. It is impossible for her not to be anxious. Jiang Hai, I don't think he will go. Thinking of Jiang Hai, what he is most afraid of is embarrassment. He probably won't go. Hearing Li's words, Li's mother couldn't help but be a little depressed. But then she thought about it. Li's mother whispered to Li, maybe they can change their thinking. It doesn't matter if Jiang Hai goes or not. As long as he goes to check the things he wants to check, then it will be fine. Although it is reasonable to say that it needs to be 4 days of abstinence for it to be effective, Jiang Hai should have no problem. While the mother and daughter were studying there, it was already noon in the blink of an eye. Qijia, and Jiang Hai also came out of the room. Today is the first day of the new year. It can be regarded as the real new year. Jiang Hai had already distributed the gifts yesterday. Fortunately, he brought a lot of things, including gold jewelry and luxury goods. So the 2 sisters-in-law who suddenly appeared didn't have a New Year's gift. But in fact, the gifts that Jiang Hai prepared for them have already been sent back to Winthrop. It can only be said that these 2 guys are lucky. After staying at home for a day on the first day of the new year, they naturally have to stay here at night. As long as Jiang Hai and Li slept together, Li would naturally have needs. But today, Li was a little strange. Although she still didn't bring a raincoat, she asked Jiang Hai to put it on her. Jiang Hai also listened to her opinion. After finishing, Jiang Hai went to drink water. As for Li, she quietly collected the things on her body and put them in a sealed container that has been sterilized. She decided that after sending Jiang Hai home tomorrow, she will go to the hospital to check on herself and Jiang Hai. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, Li sent Jiang Hai home. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yinshen, who hadn't seen Jiang Hai for 3 days, missed him very much when they saw him. Although they knew that these 2 little sluts were with Jiang Hai, nothing good would happen. But Li had more important things to do, so she left. After going to the hospital, she and Jiang Hai's things were tested. Based on the people that Li's mother found, they quickly came to the conclusion that Li's body was fine. Of course, there were many things that needed to be checked, but at first glance, there was no problem. As for Jiang Hai's things, there was no problem either. The only problem was that Jiang Hai's things were too strong and had a strong survival ability. In other words, it was very strong. In other words, Jiang Hai's things were fighting in Li and Feng Yunshen's bodies, fighting for the opportunity to merge. Basically, before the boss was chosen, they all died. That was why they got pregnant. Sometimes being too thin and weak was a problem, Being too strong was also a problem. Fortunately, it didn't prevent them from getting pregnant. It was just that the chances were lower. Who knew when the boss would get pregnant? And it was foreseeable that the quality would be quite good. For such a result, Qili and Feng Yinchen really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fortunately, nothing happened, and that was the most important thing. Jiang Hai didn't know about these things. After he returned home, he accompanied Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yinchen for a few days. On the 15th day of the month, he went to Qi Li's house to stay for 2 days. Then it was the day that he set to move the graves. Qi Li could have had an earlier holiday, but she had to stay at home for a while during the new year. In addition, Jiang Hai needed to move the graves, so he had to wait for a while before he went back to work. That was why he was so busy and came back so late. Now that he had some time, he could stay at home until March, and then go back to work in the capital. Early in the morning, many cars drove to Jiang Hai's house. These cars were all black Bentleys, which Qi Li found. After learning that Jiang Hai was going to move the graves, she paid attention to it. Naturally, Jiang Hai didn't need to worry about the motorcade. Jiang Hai's friends also came. When they saw Bernice, Ono, Qi Jie and Qi they were stunned. When they went to visit Jiang Hai, they saw Qi Jie and Qi, but they didn't know the relationship between them and Qi Li. Therefore, they thought that Jiang Hai directly brought them back. They had to admit that as Jiang Hai, he had money and girls. What was there to be dissatisfied with? In addition to Jiang Hai's women and friends, the only person who didn't know his friends and women well was Xia. Today Xia came with her 4-year-old son. Jiang Hai saw her once when her son was born, but he didn't see her again. Seeing Jiang Hai's extravagance, Xia, who had some doubts about whether Jiang Hai was really in the United States, was completely convinced at this time. It seemed that her cousin was not an ordinary person. According to Bing City's customs, they had to admit that it was really troublesome. Fortunately, the cremated remains of Jiang Hai's parents were placed in the crematorium, and the other party had already prepared everything. There was no need to set up a grave, pick up the bones, or make a grave mound. But even so, Jiang Hai was still very busy. From 5 a.m. to dawn the motorcade set off. It was not until 11 a.m. that everything was done. Then they went to the restaurant Jiang Hai booked for a meal to thank him for his help. "You're doing well now. Aunt's spirit in heaven will be very pleased to see you like this." After greeting everyone, Jiang Hai returned to the restaurant. He sat there and was about to take a bite, but at this time, Xia came over with her son in her arms. She looked at Jiang Hai and said with a smile, "I hope so." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. A child wants to support his parents, but the parents are not there. This sentence could not be more appropriate for him. "Which one is your wife?" "And these are." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia looked at the other people at the table and asked with some doubts. Those men were naturally Jiang Hai's friends. But when she came, she was very interested in the 3 foreign women and the large group of women. Now that they were all sitting together, she was even more interested. "Oh, this is my wife Qi Li. You should have met her before. These 2 are my adopted daughters in the United States, Delina and Maxianen. These 2 are Qi Li's sisters Qi Jie and Qi. The remaining 3 are my friends. This is my former classmate Feng Yunchen. This is Ai Xiaoxi. This is Azalina Vicabrio. This is my uncle's cousin, Xia. And this is my nephew." Hearing Xia's words, Jiang Hai remembered that he hadn't introduced them to them yet. So he immediately stood up and introduced them to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia shook hands with Qi Li first. Her husband was also a businessman. Although his assets were only a few million, he often took her to some high-end places. Therefore, her eyes were still very sharp when it came to clothes, jewelry and the like. Whether it was Qi Li, Delina, Maxianen, Qi Jie, Azalina, or Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi's clothes were all from very expensive brands, especially Qi Li. The clothes she was wearing should be tailor-made for Burberry. The coat alone was worth 150,000 yuan, and the clothes inside were even more expensive. Her clothes were almost 400,000 yuan in total, not including the watches, bags, and shoes, which were also extremely luxurious brands. Her entire outfit was worth at least 3 to 5 million yuan. Moreover, She had a luxurious aura and spoke very appropriately. In an instant, she gave people a feeling that they could only look up to her. However, what surprised her was that such a noble and domineering older sister was wearing a set of gold jewelry at this time. In an instant, she felt that her level had been lowered. In fact, it was reasonable to say that Qi Li usually didn't wear gold jewelry. Although platinum and diamonds would lose money when they were bought, it was still better than wearing gold jewelry. Therefore, not only Qi Li, but also Qi Ye and Qi Jie usually didn't wear gold jewelry. But now, they were wearing gold jewelry, because these things were given to them by Jiang Hai, which was the most important thing. Hello, sister. Oh, this handsome boy, how old is he? Hearing Jiang Hai's introduction, Qi Li also turned her head and said to He Xia lightly. Then she looked at He Xia's 4-year-old son. But obviously, He Xia's 4-year-old son was a little timid. As soon as he saw Qi Li's head come closer, he took the initiative to run behind He Xia and looked at her timidly. It's the first time we meet. Jiang Hai didn't tell me, and I didn't prepare anything. Well, here is 1,000 yuan. Take it as a meeting gift for the child. As Qi Li said, she took out 1,000 yuan from her bag and was about to put it in He Xia's hand. No, it's not the new year or a festival. It's not necessary. However, He Xia didn't take it. Instead, she took her son back and avoided the money that Qi Li put in her hand. Qi Li also smiled. Hua Xia's people were like this. When they gave money to others, they would refuse it. Sister, it's not for you. It's for the child, isn't it? As Qi Li said, she took a step forward and continued to put the money in He Xia's hand. I can't accept the money. If sister-in-law is really sincere, the day after tomorrow is my dad's 60th birthday. You and Jiang Hai must come. Looking at Qi Li in front of her, He Xia shook her head firmly and then said with a serious face, Ugh, the day after tomorrow? Hearing He Xia's words, Qi Li looked at Jiang Hai behind her with a trace of inquiry in her eyes. Jiang Hai sighed helplessly. He knew that sometimes favors couldn't be avoided. Okay, sister, it's uncle's birthday the day after tomorrow. I will definitely be there. Even if it was only for the sake of He Xia's face today, Jiang Hai must go. Chapter 667. Hua Xia was too big, and every region had different customs. For example, some provinces and cities in the south were particular about men having their birthdays close to each other, and women having their birthdays full. The meaning was simple. Men's birthdays were close to each other, and women's birthdays were full. For example, for men's 60th birthday, they had to celebrate their birthdays at 59 years old, and women had to celebrate their birthdays at 60 years old. But in Bing City, it was different. Jiang Hai's eldest uncle was 60 years old this year, and in today's society, 60 years old was not considered old. Most people chose not to celebrate their birthdays, but Jiang Hai's eldest uncle still chose to celebrate his birthdays. After all, this was considered his official retirement. This morning, his eldest uncle and his family changed into new clothes and coats, and went to the hotel they booked. They were waiting for the guests to come and celebrate his birthday. That's right. He did not put it at home. He put it at the hotel. Jiang Hai's eldest uncle had 2 daughters, and both daughters had 2 son-in-laws who were doing business. Naturally, they had a lot of friends. In addition to Jiang Hai's relatives, as well as Jiang Hai's aunt's relatives, there were quite a lot of people. There were about 6 or 7 tables. The people who came first went to find a place to play cards or mahjong. Of course, most of the people were there to chat. The dinner was booked at 11:30 p.m. Jiang Hai really did not want to come. He wanted to come on time, but Qi Li did not think so. Jiang Hai was not on good terms with his relatives, but Qi Li was his daughter-in-law, and she had to come earlier. Jiang Hai did not want to bring her along, but she knew that it was not good for her not to come. He was in a dilemma. In the end, Jiang Hai and Qi Li arrived at 11 p.m. They drove Qi Li's car. When they arrived at the hotel, the receptionist saw them and went up to them. This receptionist was He Yu's friend, and Jiang Hai had met him before. After exchanging some pleasantries, they walked into the lobby and paid the red packet at the entrance. Jiang Hai had wanted to give them 500 renminbi. Anyway, he did not prepare for it, and his family could still return it. But Qili did not feel good. Jiang Hai and Qili were not short of money. Although he was 60 years old and did not have a good life, he still gave them a red packet of 2,000 renminbi. Jiang Hai was quite reluctant to give it. After receiving the red packet, Jiang Hai and Qili entered the lobby. When Jiang Hai and Qili walked in, many people looked at them. Of course, they were not looking at Jiang Hai, but at Qili. Qili was really beautiful. In addition, she was wearing expensive clothes and had the aura of an iceberg CEO. No matter where she went, she was the absolute center of attention. The moment Qili walked in, both men and women turned to look at them. Of course, the men were looking at Qili's extremely good looks. Even if she was wearing winter clothes, she still had a very good figure. The women were looking at Qili's clothes, bags, and jewelry. But when they found that those things seemed to be very expensive, they were a little disdainful. In their opinion, these clothes might be real. However, such a set of clothes must be fake. In their eyes, Qili was wearing a fake set of clothes. If Qili knew what they were thinking, she would probably laugh. At this time, Jiang Hai's relatives also saw Jiang Hai and Qili. After Jiang Hai walked in, he actually saw these people from afar. But he didn't want to talk to them. He just went to his uncle, wished him happiness, and introduced Qili to him. Then, he found a corner to eat melon seeds. Qili didn't have any intention to understand these people, so she sat next to Jiang Hai and talked to him about the restaurant. Yo brother, I heard from sister you that you were in Dubai. Didn't you have time to come? How did you get the time? While Jiang Hai and Qili were chatting, a girl who seemed to be in her 20s came over with a boy who was about the same age as her. She asked Jiang Hai with a smile. The boy beside her kept his head down and glanced at Qili. Indeed, compared to Qili, this girl, whether it was her aura or her appearance, was much worse. This girl was called He Rui, the daughter of Jiang Hai's second uncle. She was 23 years old this year and had just graduated from college. It was said that she worked in a medical equipment company, and the boy next to her was her boyfriend, the owner of the company. In this era, the medical equipment business had no dignity. Doctors and nurses could make them bleed, but they did make a lot of money, especially when it was related to the state. For example, when the heart stents were produced, the materials, labor, taxes, and so on were all included. When it was sold, the domestic stents were sold for 12,000 yuan, and the imported ones were sold at a sky-high price, and the medical insurance didn't reimburse them. However, you had to buy them. This was the reality. Therefore, the medical equipment business made a lot of money. However, no matter how much money they made, they couldn't make as much as Jiang Hai and Qili. The Qi Group, which was controlled by Qili, had a total market value of more than 20 billion yuan, of which it had increased by nearly 7 billion yuan this year. The Qi family held more than half of the shares, monopolizing more than 10 billion yuan. When it was distributed to Qili, it was at least 3 billion yuan. Therefore, she was a well-deserved rich woman. Of course, compared with Jiang Hai, there was still a big gap. In only 1 year, Jiang Hai had made 3 billion yuan from selling cattle, and 2 billion yuan from digging treasures in the sea. Jiang Hai's assets, in terms of RMB, were at least 20 billion yuan, not including the land of the manor. However, when the fishing season started next month, his assets should double again. According to his estimation, it shouldn't be a problem for him to double. The day before yesterday was the day your aunt moved her grave, so I definitely had to come back. Glancing at her, Jiang Hai said calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, He Rui was at a loss for words, but still wore a disdainful expression on her face. In fact, these people all knew that Jiang Hai had moved his parents' graves, and He Xia was the only one who went there in the end. In their eyes, they didn't need this cousin of theirs. Since he wasn't needed, there was no need for him to attend such a thing and pay for it. Therefore, everyone pretended that they didn't know about it, but they couldn't say it out loud. Once Jiang Hai said it, they directly stopped talking. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't want to talk to her either. What was there to talk about? Cousin, right? Nice to meet you. My name is Dong Jian, and I'm Rui's boyfriend. May I know where you work? This should be sister-in-law, right? Feeling that she was suppressed by Jiang Hai, Hirue felt a little embarrassed. So she gently nudged her boyfriend, who was staring at Chili, with the tip of her elbow, and asked him to speak. Her boyfriend reacted quickly, and immediately said with a smile, "Oh, I raise cattle, and this is your sister-in-law." Looking at Dong Jian, who came over, Jiang Hai didn't even look at him, and said while drinking tea. Looking at Jiang Hai's attitude, Dong Jian frowned. This Jiang Hai is a little arrogant. But he didn't stop there. Didn't Jiang Hai say that he was a cattle breeder? Raising cattle? Raising cattle? What can he do? Hey, raising cattle to make money now? I heard that raising cattle can at most earn 800 to 1,000 renminbi per cow. And you still have to work hard for more than a year. It's not worth it. Why don't you come to my family's company for an interview? You can start from the bottom. You can get a guaranteed salary of 3,000 renminbi per month. And the commission will be calculated separately. If you do well, you will be my family, and I can promote you to a manager. Dong Jian looked at Jiang Hai and said to Jiang Hai. To him, what he said was very generous. The cost of living in Bing City was not high, and a new graduate can get 3,000 renminbi per month with commission. At Jiang Hai's age, of course, it was not the same as a new graduate. But the starting salary of 3,000 renminbi per month with commission was still very attractive to some office workers. If the market was not good, they could at least get 5,000 to 6,000 renminbi per month. If they had good connections, they could even get 10,000 renminbi per month. Dear, he doesn't want you to raise cattle, and he wants you to work. Hee, what a joke. When Jiang Hai heard what Dong Jian said, he didn't know what to say. If it was a year ago, this might be a good job for him. But now, ha ha ha. Chili laughed when she heard what Dong Jian said. She knew why Jiang Hai did not want to come to Bing City. Sister-in-law, what's so funny about this? Dong Jian was stunned when he saw Chili's smile. But he reacted quickly and looked at Chili. Although he knew that Chili's words were not good, he was still willing to listen. I'm sorry. It's not that I look down on you and your company. But from the looks of it, my husband will not work at your company. Shaking her head, Chili couldn't help but say in a bureaucratic tone when she heard Dong Jian still wanted to ask why. These people are really outrageous. Dong Jian's face turned ugly when he heard Chili's reply. The conversation was killed again. Oh, brother is here. Little Rue is also here. Brother, aren't you in Dubai? Why are you back? But at this moment their savior came. They only saw the youngest daughter of Jiang Hai's uncle, Hiyu, coming over with a man who was much older than Jiang Hai. As soon as she came to Jiang Hai's table, she said sarcastically. It seemed that she had already told them everything about Jiang Hai being in Dubai. According to Jiang Hai's routine last year, they would believe that Jiang Hai had the money to go out and play. Didn't you hear what your sister said? If your sister didn't say it, then pretend that I didn't say it. Listening to Hiyu's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. He was already a little lazy to explain these things, because they had already determined that he was lying. So there was no need to explain. Dubai? Brother, you really dare to say that? I did some research. If you want to go to Dubai, it will cost about 30,000 yuan for 2 people. If you and that money, how good would it be for you and sister-in-law to live a good life? We are all family. Who doesn't know each other? Don't say this in the future. Hearing Jiang Hai's lazy explanation, Hiyu thought that she was right and said with a proud face. What? Hearing Hiyu's words, Jiang Hai treated it as if she was farting, but Chili raised her eyebrows. She really didn't think that Jiang Hai had such a status in her family. Just as she was about to say something to stand up for Jiang Hai, her hand was grabbed by Jiang Hai. Feeling Jiang Hai's palm, Chili's heart gradually calmed down. She thought much more than Jiang Hai, because she could see that these people had been targeting Jiang Hai for a long time. It was very likely that after Jiang Hai's mother passed away, they treated Jiang Hai like this. Thinking of her past, she seemed to be one of these people. Thinking of this, Chili's hand, that was holding Jiang Hai's hand, tightened. Sometimes people always unintentionally hurt others, and her really wasn't particularly unintentional. But it doesn't matter if you don't have a chance to go. My husband and I have decided to go on our honeymoon. 35,000 yuan, for an ordinary family, is a lot of money. But for us it doesn't matter. right, husband? Ignoring Qi Li's thoughts, He couldn't help but look at Xiangming next to her, and said with a smile. At this time, Xiangming was also looking at Qi Li. However, it wasn't that kind of thinking. Instead, he was deep in thought, as if he was recalling something. It wasn't until He called out to him that he reacted. However, he didn't have the time to care about his silly girlfriend. Instead, he carefully moved closer to her. Excuse me, are you President Qi of the Qi group? Xiangming asked Qi Li with great caution. Oh, do we know each other? Because Xiangming came with Qi Li originally didn't want to talk to him. However, she didn't expect him to know her. This surprised Qi Li a little. She didn't have many friends in Bing City, especially low-class people like Xiangming. I don't know. I dare not say that I know you. I have been to your restaurant, and bumped into you at the corridor. I was with Chief Zhang and introduced myself once. I think you are a person of high status, and have forgotten about me. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Xiangming, and I own Shanghang Real Estate. This company has some reputation in Bing City, but it cannot be compared to your Qi group. Upon hearing Qi Li's words, Xiangming immediately turned into his lackey mode, and knelt down with a smirk on his face. After hearing his words, Hirue and Dong Jian, who was next to him, were all stunned. This was different from what they had said just now. They were going to ridicule Jiang Hai. What was going on? The three of them looked at each other, and then looked at Xiangming. Did this guy make a mistake? What the hell was this? President Qi. However, at this time, another exclamation came from the side. They turned around and saw Xia and her family. Chapter 668. The person who made this sound was none other than Xia's husband, Qianfei. This guy was actually not a good person. This could be seen from the fact that he was walking alone in front, while Xia was carrying a bag, and carrying a child behind him. However, when she saw Jiang Hai arrive, Xia still smiled and nodded to Jiang Hai. Then, she carried the child and walked over. As for Qianfei, he had already squeezed Xiangming to the side, and looked at Qi Li with a fawning expression. President Qi, why are you here? I really didn't know that your arrival really brought glory to our canopy. Looking at Qi Li, Qianfei said with a smile. Hearing his words, Qi Li just smiled and nodded. Then, she looked at Xia and her son. Come nephew, come to auntie. Looking at Xia's son in front of her, Qi Li said with a smile. Yes, go and let President Qi hug him. President Qi, this is my son. Seeing that Qi Li ignored him, Qianfei didn't care, and still said with a smile. His fawning mode was not ordinary. Hey little handsome, do you recognize me? Hearing his father's words, Xia's son, who was still a little afraid, couldn't help but hide back. However, Qi Li took a step forward, and looked at Xia's son with a smile. Yes, I recognize you. Looking at his parents, Xia's son whispered. When Qianfei wanted to go forward to speak, he was pulled by Yu. At the same time, she pulled Xiangming, who was about to go over and fawn. Old Xiang, brother-in-law. What's the matter with you two? What are you doing? Aren't we here to expose Jiang Hai? What are you two doing? Looking at the two people in front of her, Yu was really angry. This was simply a slap in her face. She has something to do with Jiang Hai? Hearing Yu's words, Qianfei, who came in later, didn't quite understand the situation. He glanced at them in confusion, and didn't say anything. He just sat there and watched Qi Li and Xia's son play with Jiang Hai with a smile. She's Jiang Hai's wife. She's born with a foxy appearance. Just like Jiang Hai, she's obviously not a good person. She's even wearing branded goods from street stalls. She still has the nerve to wear them out. Hearing Qianfei's words, Yu couldn't help but feel a little angry. What do you know? This is CEO Qi. Let Xiangming tell you. CEO Qi, my son is quite smart, right? Haha, I really didn't think that CEO Qi and my son would be so fated. I didn't even know that CEO Qi was Little Hai's wife. Then I'm quite embarrassed to call myself brother-in-law. Come son, call aunt. Hearing Yu's words, Qianfei couldn't help but glare at her. Then, he turned on his lackey mode again, and walked over with a smile on his face. If it weren't for his ears, he probably would have grinned. What's going on? Qianfei could ignore Yu, but Xiangming couldn't. Therefore, Yu grabbed Xiangming, who also wanted to kneel and lick her feet, and said angrily. This was completely different from her original script. Your cousin may not be as simple as you think. CEO Chi's name is Chi. She's the general manager of Chi's Group. It can be said that Chi's Group belongs to her family. Because the chairman is her mother, this company has a close relationship with the imperial court. Its total assets are tens of billions. In other words, the woman in front of you has a net worth of more than 10 billion. Compared to her, I'm just a small insect. So if you don't want me to go bankrupt, you'd better be careful with your words. Hearing he use words, Xiangming immediately explained in a low voice. Hearing Xiangming's words, He's first reaction was confusion. Her second reaction was that it was impossible. Her third reaction was that they must have mistaken her for someone else. Jiang Hai. It could be said that they grew up together. They knew better than anyone else what kind of life he had. How could such a poor loser one day be able to hook up with such a fair, rich, and beautiful woman? No matter whether others believed it or not, he didn't believe it. Even if this fair, rich, and beautiful woman was tired of playing outside, and her body was damaged, it was absolutely impossible for her to let Jiang Hai take advantage of her. Therefore, after hearing Xiangming's words, he didn't understand. She couldn't understand what was going on at all. In fact, now not only He Yu, but also He Rui and her boyfriend Dong Jian were confused. They looked at Jiang Hai with disbelief. Although it was Qi Li's net worth of 10 billion, Jiang Hai was Qi Li's husband. No matter how poor he was, it was absolutely impossible for him to lack money. Especially Dong Jian. What did he say just now? Going to work in his company with a basic salary of 3,000 yuan? Damn, he believed that if Jiang Hai was willing, he could even open such a company by himself. Did he say something wrong just now? Yes, he was very sure himself. Jiang Hai is not like what you think. You should have gone the day before yesterday. Jiang Hai's current strength is far beyond what you can imagine. His home is in Boston, and he has adopted 2 foreign girls. According to what I said when I chatted with them, Jiang Hai does indeed raise cattle in Boston. However, his manor is worth $280 million. They didn't say how much he earns in a year, but looking at them, it's definitely not a small amount. Most importantly, between Jiang Hai and Qi Li, Jiang Hai is the dominant one. You know what this means, right? Looking at her younger sister's confused look, He Xia inched closer and whispered to her. Hearing He Xia's words, He Yu and He Rui's expressions became even worse. The 2 girls glanced at Jiang Hai. To be honest, they were in a very bad mood now, that a person they had always looked down on suddenly sat on top of them. They were used to being arrogant. Although they were snobbish, they really couldn't bring themselves to look for Jiang Hai. So they turned their heads and left first. He Rui thought for a moment, and remembered her face just now. If she were Jiang Hai, she wouldn't forgive herself, so she also turned and left. As for Dong Jian, although he also wanted to curry favor with Jiang Hai, he had nothing to say since He Rui wasn't there. And in his opinion, in fact, he seemed to be the one who offended Jiang Hai the most. A basic salary of 3,000 yuan. Sigh, wasn't this a slap to Jiang Hai's face? So he also left with his tail between his legs. As for Qi Li, after playing with He Xia's children for a while, she also sat next to Jiang Hai. She clearly told Xiangming and Qian Fei that they needed to be quiet, so the 2 had to leave. Soon, everyone who came knew that Jiang Hai was now successful. He found a boss with a net worth of 10 billion yuan to be his wife. Even Jiang Hai's uncles and aunts were alarmed. Jiang Hai's first uncle He Wei Hua, second uncle He Wei Ya, uncle He Wei An, and Aunt He Jilly all asked their families to come and chat with Jiang Hai. Xiangming, Qian Fei, and Qi Li could ignore them, but Jiang Hai's immediate relatives really couldn't say anything. They could only deal with it with a smile. Their children also came to talk to Qi Li. Some even directly asked for her phone number. Facing such a situation, Qi Li looked at Jiang Hai helplessly. Jiang Hai could only shrug his shoulders and express that he couldn't help. Originally, he didn't want to let Qi Li come. Qi Li insisted on coming, so he couldn't be blamed. Before the banquet started, Jiang Hai's table was the most lively. After the banquet started, it was even more lively. Everyone wanted to sit at this table. Because of this, they almost quarreled. In the end, when they saw that Chili was a little unhappy, they restrained themselves. However, the theme of the banquet was completely messed up. Originally, it was to celebrate Jiang Hai's uncle's 60th birthday. But now the main character had become Chili. In this regard, Chili could only laugh. After lunch, Jiang Hai's uncle originally invited Jiang Hai and Chili to stay and eat at his house in the evening. However, Jiang Hai didn't agree. He could see that Chili already regretted coming here. So, he said that he had something to do, and then left. After walking out of the restaurant, Jiang Hai looked at Chili, who was a little tired. He couldn't help but hug her shoulder and smile. "You must be tired." Looking at Chili, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Chili felt Jiang Hai's hand, and also leaned on Jiang Hai's shoulder. "Yeah, this is the first time I've dealt with something like this. In the past, I went to those social gatherings whenever I wanted to, and I didn't go if I didn't want to. No one would give me a hard time, so I still had to accept it. Coming to you today has really been a training exercise." Rubbing her stiff face, Chili said helplessly. Her starting point was too high. Her first job was the general manager of the Luz Group. When her connections and money accumulated to a certain extent, even if she was a woman, no one would dare to show off to her. It was completely impossible for her to encounter the things that ordinary female employees encountered in the workplace. Seeing that Chili was a little tired, Jiang Hai also tightened his arms. He didn't know how he felt about the woman in his arms at this time. Was it the initial gratitude, excitement, love, family, friendship, or the initial hatred? Or was it guilt? Jiang Hai was a little confused. He really didn't know what to say to Chili now. After all, the relationship between them was not so pure. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai took Chili back to his home. After playing with Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshen, Daliana, Marian and Azalina at home, Chili spent the night at Jiang Hai's house for the first time. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai lived on the sofa. The next morning, the first to leave was Chili because she had to go back to work. The second to leave was Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshen. Jiang Hai also asked them if they had made up their minds to go to Boston with Jiang Hai. But the two women seemed to have made up their minds at this time. They would go but not now. They would wait until next year. Jiang Hai could wait, so it didn't matter. After they left, Bernice and Littleya, oh no, now they should be called Qijia and Zhaoya, joined Jiang Hai's house because they were preparing to return to Winthrop with Jiang Hai. After Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshen left, Jiang Hai and the others also prepared to leave. On February 29th this year, Jiang Hai and the others stayed at home for 2 days. On March 2nd, they boarded a plane to the imperial capital. They were going to go from the imperial capital to New York, and then from New York to Boston. There was no other way. There were only a few domestic flights to the United States, so Jiang Hai and the others had to be in such a hurry. As they entered March, everything was different. Although Boston was definitely the northernmost area in the United States. Except for Alaska, its latitude was about the same as the imperial capital. In March, the imperial capital was already in full bloom. And so was Boston. After getting off the plane, Robbins Garcia and the others drove over to pick up Jiang Hai and the others. On the way from New York to Boston, Jiang Hai could see that the snow had basically melted. After all, after entering March, the average daily temperature could reach about 8 degrees. Even on the coldest night, which was around 0 degrees Celsius, it was difficult for snow to stubbornly grow on the ground. With the nourishment of this layer of snow, this year's new grass was also growing healthily. The trees were sprouting new buds, the grass was growing new heads, and although the flowers had not bloomed, they were still budding. Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai's desire to return to the manor was even more urgent. However, before returning to Winthrop, Jiang Hai and the others still had to make a detour to Boston, because Jiang Hai received news that his precious shield had been repaired. And after hearing that the car had been repaired, Qijia, also known as Bernice, still remembered that Jiang Hai said that he would buy her a car. So she urged Jiang Hai to buy a car first. The exhaustion of sitting on a plane for more than 10 hours disappeared in an instant in front of a car. Jiang Hai didn't care about this. Anyway, he was buying a car. His speed of buying a car was quite fast. If he fancied a car, he would buy it directly. There was no other way. How did things this way? Since it had been decided, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. After speaking to Robbins Garcia, the two F-750 that came to pick them up turned the steering wheel, got off the highway, and drove toward the city of Boston. It seemed that the two cars when they came out could almost pull a motorcade when they went back. Based on their understanding of Jiang Hai, as long as this guy went to the car dealership, he was destined to not return empty-handed. Was it really just to buy a car for Bernice? Hee. If Jiang Hai took a fancy to something he liked, it would be strange if he didn't buy it. For their boss, Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia, and the others had already figured out his routine. He was quite willing to spend money in this regard, but it didn't matter. They knew that Jiang Hai had this spare money. This was only the income of last year. Not to mention buying a car. Even buying a passenger plane was possible. Not to mention that their fishing farm was about to start selling. Chapter 669. Hello, Mr. Jiang. We have already prepared your car for you. Seeing Jiang Hai and the others walk in, the manager, who had already received the news, walked to Jiang Hai with a smile. The privileges of the rich in the United States really made ordinary people feel quite unbalanced. That's great. In addition to picking up the car today, I also want to see what kind of car I want to buy. Let me see my car first. Hearing the manager's words, this wasn't the first time Jiang Hai dealt with him, so he wasn't polite and smiled. When the manager heard Jiang Hai's instructions, he immediately smiled and led Jiang Hai to the garage next to him. Jiang Hai looked at his former tank and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This bulletproof car was actually destroyed by a deer. Who would believe it if he told others? But this was really the truth. When the deer rushed, coupled with the original strength of the car, it could really insert the antlers into his engine. This was something that couldn't be helped. Now looking at the brand new car in front of him, Jiang Hai patted the car door with satisfaction, and then nodded to the manager. He was quite satisfied with the car's repair. It was basically like a new car, but it still had the unique taste of Jiang Hai. Okay, this car is well repaired. I will drive this car directly in a while. I want to buy a car. Let's go and pick one. Patting the front cover of his beloved car, Jiang Hai said happily. At the same time, he looked at Chijia. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the manager naturally smiled and led everyone to the distant exhibition hall. He knew that there would be business to do when Jiang Hai came. However, just as everyone walked out of the garage and was about to go to the exhibition hall, in an instant, a car quickly drove in front of them. When they saw the car, Jiang Hai and the others didn't care at first. When the car drove straight toward them, they panicked a little, especially when the sharp-eyed Jiang Hai found that there was no driver in the car. Who the F***ck? This car doesn't have a driver. Get out of the way. Looking at the approaching car, Jiang Hai couldn't help but yell. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia and Philemon Turner, who had been driving over, immediately jumped to the side. Chijie's reaction was not slow either. She immediately pulled her sister to the side. Although Delina and Marion were scared out of their wits, fortunately, Azalina also dodged to the side. Seeing that there was no one else behind him, Jiang Hai also dodged instantly. Just as they were about to watch the car crash into the garage in the distance, the car began to slow down in front of Jiang Hai and the others. It even stopped directly in front of Jiang Hai and the others. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai and the others were stunned. They looked at each other with some doubts. As for the manager, he was also scared just now. The speed of the car was about 10 miles per hour. If it really hit someone, although it was not fatal, if something happened, it would be his responsibility. Jiang Hai and the others were all pampered. Fortunately, nothing happened. Seeing the car stop, the manager immediately walked to the door with a gloomy face. Originally, he thought that it was a child who drove the car and couldn't see the situation in front, so it went on a rampage. But when he walked to the side of the car, he was shocked because there was no one in the car at this time. What the hell? Feeling the warm sun shining on his body, the manager felt a chill in his heart. The temperature of the sun was obviously not enough to dispel the panic in his heart. He couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai and the others. And when he looked, Jiang Hai and the others were also a little panicked, because Jiang Hai also saw this scene. If there was no one driving, it was understandable that the car slipped away, because the handbrake was not pulled. But what the hell was the car stopping just now? I feel like I shouldn't buy it from you. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai still felt that it was better for him to run away first. It was better to believe in these things than not. Most importantly, Jiang Hai himself was also a member of the supernatural. Okay. To be honest, when he heard Jiang Hai's words, the manager smiled reluctantly. After all, he didn't want to lose this customer. But the problem now was that he couldn't explain what was going on. It was too scary. Jiang Hai wanted to run away, but he was willing. Manager, there was no accident just now, right? However, just as the manager was about to send Jiang Hai and the others away, an employee of the car shop hurriedly ran over. Seeing that everyone was fine, he breathed a sigh of relief. What's the matter? Let's talk about it later. This car, let's leave it here first. What the hell? Looking at the employee who came over, the manager couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the car in front of him, he couldn't help but whisper, "Hey boss, this is not a ghost. This is an autopilot function." Hearing the manager's words, the employee here couldn't help but laugh and say, "Autopilot?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai, who was about to run away, couldn't help but stop temporarily. What does this mean? This car is an all-electric car. It's a new product of Tesla. It has a system similar to our mobile phones. It can bind the user. This is the newly developed summoning function, just like this. Although the employee didn't know Jiang Hai and the others, he knew that the guests accompanied by the manager must be big customers. He also saw that Jiang Hai and the others were scared just now. He also had the responsibility to solve the riddle. Then he took out his mobile phone and trotted to the distance. Then he gave an order. The car that had been stationary started again, and there was a woman's voice in the car, using the map to determine the route. Then a magical scene happened. Just in front of Jiang Hai and the others, the car suddenly started and drove towards the employee. Moreover, the car stopped precisely in front of the employee. It didn't touch any other cars or deviate from the route at all. Hey, this is interesting. Watching the employee drive the car back, Jiang Hai touched his chin and looked at the car in front of him. He couldn't help but be curious. Come, Emile, introduce it to Mr. Jiang. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little curious about the car, he also knew that the car could drive on its own. It was not haunted like he thought. At that moment, the soul of the businessman was officially awakened, and he said to his employee. After listening to his words, his staff also followed Jiang Hai's lead and introduced him. Tesla was a representative of alternative energy vehicles. It was an American industry, headquartered in California. It was considered a high-tech company, and it could be said that it was an inventor in the field of black technology cars. Recently, the all-electric car was still very popular around the world. Not only was it popular with the government, after all, the pollution of oil and the atmosphere had been reduced a lot, but its design was also very beautiful. However, it was not without its shortcomings. The shortcoming was that it didn't run fast. In the words of an experienced driver, it was not very exciting. But recently, this car was quite popular in Europe, because electric cars in Europe could enjoy subsidies from the government. So this car was very popular in Europe. It was also sold in China, but there were not many of them. Jiang Hai had heard of all-electric cars before, but this was the first time he had seen one. This car not only has the function of self-parking, self-driving, and summoning, but it can also be locked to the user, and it can be started without a key. Seeing that Jiang Hai was really interested in this car, the employee began to introduce it to him. This car was like a more complicated mobile phone system, but to be honest, it was quite impressive at first glance. And most importantly, the car model was not ugly, and the variety was not bad. At present, Tesla cars were definitely not available in large cars, but residential cars were still very good, and there were a total of 3 models. The S model was an ordinary car, and its target was the BMW 5 Series. Its price was about the same. The cheapest was $600,000, and the most expensive was over $1 million. Of course, This was referring to RMB. In the United States, the cheapest car was about $60,000, and the most expensive car was $120,000. This car was cheap and expensive mainly because of its engine, which could also be called a generator. Other engines had the same number of cylinders and horsepower, but this thing depended on the kilowatt hour. The cheapest was 60 kilowatt hours, and the most expensive was 90 kilowatt hours. But the disadvantages were obvious. First, it was not convenient to charge. A full charge could run more than 500 kilometers, but charging it from zero would take more than 10 hours. Fast charging would damage the battery, and it would take 4.5 hours. When other cars ran out of gas, they would go to the gas station to refuel. Even if they went to the gas station, it would take them half an hour to refuel. But this car needed more than 4 hours to charge, so it was destined that this car was not suitable to be driven too far away. In theory, the speed of the car was 250 kilometers per hour, but in fact, the fastest speed was 140 kilometers per hour. In China, this car was sold for more than $1 million, but it could only reach 100 kilometers per hour. It was indeed a bit of a loss, but it was very cool to use this black technology. So Jiang Hai looked at this car, and to be honest, he was very tempted. When he thought about how he would act cool in the future, he could say something to his phone when he walked out of the restaurant, and then the car would automatically drive to his side. Thinking about it, it was still very exciting. Furthermore, the choice of this car was not small. In addition to the S-Series, there was also the X-Series, which was an SUV, and the Roadster, which was a sports car. The X-Series was slightly more expensive than the S-Series, but the Roadster was more expensive. The cheapest one cost at least $90,000. The most expensive one was nearly $200,000, but Jiang Hai really didn't lack money. Glancing at Qi Jie and the other's shining eyes, Jiang Hai decided to buy a car. Not a car, but a car, an SUV and a sports car. He didn't lack money anyway. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the manager and the staff here were very happy. This business was finally done. Jiang Hai always focused on buying cars, and it was really convenient to buy a car in the United States. In the car shops here, all kinds of procedures could be done. It could be said that they could directly buy a car with money and drive it on the road. It was that simple. After everything was done, Jiang Hai drove one car, Azalina drove another, and Qi Jie drove another. A group of 6 cars drove to the manor in a mighty manner. On the contrary, Jiang Hai's previous favorite, the battle shield, was ignored at this time. It was driven back by the other party's staff. However, Jiang Hai couldn't help it. This car was fine to drive around here. If they went out of town, he had to drive his war shield. When they returned to the manor, Jiang Hai found that the outer wall that was originally damaged by the impact of the deer herd had been repaired at this time. After knowing that Jiang Hai and the others had returned, Aphrodite and the others had already prepared food and waited for Jiang Hai at home for a long time. Naturally, Robbins Garcia and the others wouldn't be third wheels. After they left, Jiang Hai and the others happily gathered together. Originally, after Jiang Hai left, the villa had been very quiet. Even Aphrodite and the others felt that something was missing. This time, when Jiang Hai came back, they were the most excited. After all, Jiang Hai hadn't been away for so long in the past. That night, Qi Jie and Qi Ye went to sleep first. Firstly, it was because they were too tired. Secondly, it was because they wanted to let Aphrodite and the others have a good night with Jiang Hai. That night, the lights in Jiang Hai's room almost didn't go out. It wasn't until the next morning that the lights went out. Then in the afternoon, Jiang Hai and the others came out of the room. It was obvious what they were doing that night. Aphrodite and the others also used the body mixing technique to curry favor with Jiang Hai. For them, the meaning of their existence was to curry favor with Jiang Hai. They didn't want to be the key people by Jiang Hai's side, but they wanted to be an existence that Jiang Hai could vent his anger on. As long as they could stay here, that was enough. At least for them it was enough. It was said that a woman's home was a hero's grave. Jiang Hai wasn't a hero, so he stayed in a woman's home quite well. For 3 days in a row, Jiang Hai and the others stayed in the villa, and made out with each other. Later, even Chi-Jie and Chi-Ya joined in. The only people in the villa who didn't have that kind of relationship with Jiang Hai were Delina, Marian, and Azalina, who had long had feelings for Jiang Hai. Naturally, they were much bolder in the villa. In this way, the first few days of March flew by. As the temperature rose day by day, one of Winthrop's annual grand festivals was put on the agenda. Yes, the Poseidon Festival. After the Poseidon Festival, it meant that the Poseidon Festival was worshipped to the Poseidon, and they could go into the sea to catch fish. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai had been raising fish for a year, and it was time to harvest. Chapter 670. Yo, what wind blew Uncle Wallace here? Hurry up and sit inside. Looking at the car slowly stopping in front of his manor, Jiang Hai said with a smile, but at this time, his parking lot can't be parked, because there is a construction team working here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also glared at him, then parked the car in the distance, opened the door and walked over. Have you been busy recently? Looking at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace asked him with a smile, at the same time looking at the construction team in front of him. It's okay, my main job is to look after it. There's no other way. Now I'm the only idle person in the manor. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said to Mayor Wallace. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Indeed, leisure time will always pass. And now the manor has begun to get busy. Since entering March, Jiang Hai's manor has basically been in a rhythm of foot hitting the back of the head. First of all, in March the snow melted, and Jiang Hai said that he wants to build a parking lot and a greenhouse. The greenhouse is easy to build. This thing is built quickly, but building this parking lot and the road passage is an out-and-out big project. There are 2 roads to build, one from Jiang Hai's villa to the dock, half of the road in the middle to the airport, and of course to the cowshed. The other road needs to be built along the river to block the street lights. Just these 2 roads will be very troublesome. Jiang Hai is not distressed about the money. He doesn't care about the money. But this time is really a lot, and it will take almost a month to finish. Second, the flowers are blooming in spring. Jiang Hai and the others should be planting, and a new round of cultivation will start in the vineyard. In this way, Aphrodite and the others almost grew up in the vineyard, and they didn't come to Jiang Hai's manor recently. Chi-Jie and Chi-Ya began to plant vegetables with Delina and Marian. Because many women in this manor have gone to the seaside villa, the heavy responsibility of planting vegetables was handed over to them. Of course, in the evening and in the morning, they will also come to plant vegetables. In fact, they are the main force, and Chi-Ya and the others are more just watching or watering. But this also needed someone to keep an eye on it. Azalina and Conrad, the 2 bodyguards, weren't idle. They went to gather grass. Don't forget, Jiang Hai and Du Feimin still had a business deal to do. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if they had the time to do it. Everyone has something to do, and only Jiang Hai is idle, so he came to supervise the work. The greenhouse can be built in a few days. It is simple. After all, Jiang Hai doesn't plan to build a big one, but the parking lot and the 2 roads are very time-consuming. In addition, Jiang Hai made the best. The bottom is made of steel, the pillars are made of cement and reinforced stone, and the roof is made of alloy, making the whole road very sturdy. According to the person who took over this project, not to mention just snow, rain or tornadoes, it is absolutely impossible to cause any damage to the parking lot. If there was a problem within 5 years, he wouldn't ask for money and would make it up for free. Originally, he was only supposed to look at 3 years, but he dared to say 5 years. Jiang Hai also believed him. He also didn't have the habit of talking about money, and directly started to work. Unknowingly, 3 days have passed. The parking lot is gradually taking shape. This is a good thing. Originally, you are busy here. I shouldn't have come to ask, but you are now the backbone of this place. I feel that it is better to ask, will you participate in this year's Poseidon Festival? Seeing that Jiang Hai is busy, Mayor Wallace hesitated, but still decided to ask Jiang Hai. After all, this matter is not related to Jiang Hai. It is related to the situation of the town. Poseidon Festival? Hearing this, Jiang Hai's mind couldn't help but drift back to last year. The day after he killed the mountain lion for the first time last year. It seems to be the town's Poseidon festival, but because he is not very familiar with the people in the town at that time, he only went to participate in the parade. But at that time, he also copied a lot of good things, such as the treasure map of the shipwrecks. Those are absolute night weeds. But this year, he is not going to go to the shipwrecks at sea. He has a lot of things to do this year. Fishing at the end of March, tea harvesting at the beginning of April, attending the New York Beef Show in the middle of April. Buning will go to France to participate in the Magaun wine competition at the end of the month, the Brussels International Wine Competition in May. The situation in June depends on the situation, but it is just summer. It is not a good time to go out to sea. In the summer, the storms at sea were very strong, so they had to avoid June. In July, they had to harvest lobsters, and in August they had to harvest tuna. Of course, they could also go fishing. In late August, they would harvest grapes, and in September, they would harvest grapes to make wine. In October, it would be winter again, and the year would pass. So although Jiang Hai usually looked like a sloppy person, his schedule was actually very full. The train runs fast because every carriage has a power unit. It is not a bullet train, it is a train. If you want to run fast, you have to rely on the engine. Although Jiang Hai doesn't do anything, he is the engine in this manner, there is no doubt about it. He doesn't have to do anything, but he has to be here. Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, this Poseidon festival doesn't seem to be like last year, where it is just a parade. Jiang Hai doesn't know what to do. After thinking about it, he thinks it is better to ask first. Is this something that I must participate in? I don't know much about this. Scratching his head, Jiang Hai asked Mayor Wallace. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also explained to Jiang Hai, just like what Robbins Garcia and Jiang Hai said last year. The Poseidon Festival is actually a superstition. Pray, hope that the fish will be abundant, and the wind will be calm and so on. Last year, Jiang Hai didn't fish. He only went into the sea to catch some fish, so it didn't matter. However, if he wants to fish this year, it might not be good if he doesn't participate in the Poseidon Festival. Therefore, Jiang Hai thought for a while, and called Edward Anderson first. Sure enough, it was just as Jiang Hai thought. They want to fish this year, so they must participate in the Poseidon Festival. After receiving the news, Jiang Hai also looked at Mayor Wallace. Uncle Wallace, we are going to participate. Tell us what you need us to do. Is it money or something? Looking at Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai said seriously. Although he didn't believe in these things, sometimes these habits still had to be respected. Besides, since Edward Anderson said that he must participate, Jiang Hai wouldn't embarrass his second-in-command. I don't need you to pay, but after all, your status is different now. So if you want to participate, you can't just follow the crowd like last year. This year, I'm going to let you hold the Poseidon's gift. Hearing that Jiang Hai was going to participate, Mayor Wallace also nodded in satisfaction. Then he said the purpose of his visit. You want me to hold it? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. Jiang Hai knew very well what the Poseidon's gift was. Last year he saw it. It was the Poseidon slug of the Atlantic Ocean. But last year, he took the initiative to help, but Mayor Wallace didn't let him touch it. According to Mayor Wallace's words, only the mayor could hold the Poseidon's gift. But what does this mean this year? Seeing the doubt in Jiang Hai's eyes, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh and explain to Jiang Hai. Every year, there are only 3 possibilities for the person holding the sea god's gift. The first is an elder that everyone trusts, the second is a noble divine envoy, and the third is a hero. As for me, although it's a bit embarrassing to say this, as the mayor of this town, I'm still a trustworthy elder. Among us there are no divine envoys, nor were there any heroes before. But it's different now. Seeing the doubt in Jiang Hai's eyes, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh and explained to Jiang Hai. How is it different? Hearing these 3 names, Jiang Hai tried to compare them, but it seemed that he couldn't match any of them. I'm definitely not an elder. This is fixed. Secondly, I shouldn't be a brave person. This is also fixed. Thirdly, It's even more impossible for me to be an oracle. If I say that I'm from the East, it would make sense. After all, I have a dragon tattoo on my body. But this is the United States. The dragons in the United States are big lizards with wings. What kind of oracle am I? So after hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was even more confused. How can I hold this thing? Because you are an angel who brings the residents of the town to a better life. So you are also considered an oracle. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his explanation, Jiang Hai instantly became Spartan. If I'm considered an oracle like this. He seemed to see him wearing a priest's outfit, and then saying to the beautiful nun kneeling in front of him, "Come, child of the Lord. This is the trumpet of heaven. Please put it in your mouth affectionately." Can I? I'll just fork out the money and follow you, just like last year." After hesitating, Jiang Hai said to Mayor Wallace. He was really a person who was afraid of trouble, and now it seemed that it was really troublesome. "Haha, don't worry, it won't take up too much of your time. It's only 2 days. When the time comes, I will come to you in advance. The first day is a walk, and the second day is the ceremony. Just do as I say." Hearing Jiang Hai's obvious excuses, Mayor Wallace shook his head. Jiang Hai finally agreed. He wouldn't easily stop Jiang Hai from doing it, so he patted Jiang Hai's shoulder, and this matter was settled. Then, while Jiang Hai was a little depressed, he drove away happily. However, Jiang Hai waited until evening and told everyone about this matter. Originally, he thought that because this would delay the construction period, everyone would object. But unexpectedly, Robbins Garcia and the others were extremely excited because in their view, the annual Poseidon Festival was extremely sacred. It was like the torch-bearers of the Olympic Games. In some people's eyes, it was a thankless task. Anyway, they didn't want to watch the Olympic Games and didn't pay attention to it. They would rather sleep at home, or do their own things if they had the time. But in some people's eyes, it was a supreme honor. Being responsible for holding the gift of Poseidon during the Poseidon Festival was a supreme honor, at least in Winthrop. Edward Anderson and the others would never be able to touch the fish tank in their lifetime. The fish tank represented the supreme honor of Winthrop. Edward Anderson remembered that when he was young, he had a friend who was curious about the gift of Poseidon. He sneaked into the room where the gift of Poseidon was kept at night and accidentally broke the fish tank. Later, he was directly expelled from the town. Since then, Edward Anderson had never seen him again. This showed how important this position was in the eyes of the people of Winthrop. Now Jiang Hai was going to hold the fish tank. In their eyes, this wasn't a fish tank. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was the Holy Grail. "Don't worry, boss. I'll call my wife over to help you look after the construction. There will definitely be no problems. You must practice well." Looking at Jiang Hai eagerly and admiringly, Philemon Turner said with a serious face. He didn't even hesitate to ask his wife to take leave and come back to look after it. Hearing Philemon's words, the other people of Winthrop nodded enthusiastically. They couldn't be careless about this matter. Looking at their fanatical looks, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say for a while. In the end, he could only smile a little awkwardly. At the same time, he was also a little curious about the mission he had to complete. Time passed day by day. Du Feynman had already sent people over to collect the first batch of fodder. The greenhouse was also completely built and ready for use. After the seedlings were planted, the fertile land allowed the seedlings that had frozen to death in the winter to grow sturdily. The weather had also reached about 10 degrees, and the annual Sea God Festival began again at this time. The day before, Jiang Hai left home and was busy from morning to night. He walked the route between the town and the seaside no less than 20 times. After remembering all the requirements clearly, he had to endure Mayor Wallace's constant nagging. Fortunately, the sea god ceremony began on the second day after the most nagging day had passed. Chapter 671. There was no exact time for the Poseidon Festival. Last year, the Poseidon Festival was held in early summer, but this year, it was held in early spring. There was also a meaning behind this, because when it was held, the things that were sought were also different. Last year, The festival was held in summer, and the festival was only for peace and tranquility. Because there were no more fish in Winthrop at that time, there was no need to go out to sea. Therefore, the festival was held in summer, and there were no storms or anything like that. But this year was different. There were tourists this year. Even if there were fewer fish in the sea, they still had to bring the tourists out to play. This was also considered to be a source of income. Therefore, since the new year, the town had already decided that the Poseidon Festival would be held in March, just in time for the fishing season. Early in the morning, all the residents of the town who were still free gathered in the town. In the town square, Mayor Wallace gave the order, and the Poseidon Festival began. Jiang Hai also cooperated and lifted the huge fish tank. In an instant, everyone started to shout. They had to admit that it was really quite impressive. Then, the person in charge of the music in front led the way, and the crowd set off. The group of people walked towards the seaside in a mighty manner. The most dazzling person in the crowd was Jiang Hai, who was holding the fish tank. He had to admit that it was an honor. However, it was actually quite tiring. The fish tank was not small, and could hold about 10 kilograms of water. In addition to the weight of the tank, it weighed about 25 kilograms. Although it didn't seem like much, it was impossible to not be tiring to carry it all the way to the seaside. When Mayor Wallace held the fish tank, he could even change his posture or something. This was also the privilege of being an old man. However, Jiang Hai was young and strong, so he was too embarrassed to change his posture or something like that. Therefore, he kept holding the fish tank. Unlike yesterday's rehearsal, there were a lot of people today, and naturally they walked very slowly. Fortunately, there were no other programs. After walking for more than 2 hours, Jiang Hai and the others walked from the town to the seaside. Along the way, not only did they attract a large number of townspeople, but there were also many tourists who were very interested in the parade. They took videos along the way and followed the parade. They were also very interested in the Atlantic blue dragon that Jiang Hai was hugging. Unfortunately, the townspeople didn't allow them to get too close. Although most of the tourists were ordinary people and kind-hearted people, there were still some who liked to cause trouble. If the blue dragon and the fish tank were damaged, it would be meaningless to chase him out. Therefore, the best way was to prevent tourists from getting close. Just let them watch from afar. However, this also made the tourists very curious. Along the way, there were more and more people. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's hard days would come to an end one day. After walking for more than 2 hours, he finally arrived at the seaside. After Mayor Wallace finished his prayer, Jiang Hai put the fish tank into the sea. After watching the blue dragon in the fish tank swim into the sea and disappear completely, he raised the empty fish tank. Then the townspeople shouted loudly. This meant that the sea god had received their gift. At this time, the sea god ceremony was officially over. After Jiang Hai handed the fish tank to the townspeople, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Then he walked to a tent at the side to rest. This tent was specially prepared for him yesterday. It was to prevent him from not having a place to rest when he was tired. It used to belong to Mayor Wallace, but now it belonged to Jiang Hai. The tent itself wasn't small. Not to mention sitting, it could even fit 2 or 3 people lying down. Because Mayor Wallace used to hold meetings here in the past, the tent was very sturdy and of good quality. As long as the zipper was pulled up, the people inside could see the situation outside. However, the people outside couldn't see the situation inside. How are you? Are you tired? Today was the Sea God's ceremony, so Robbins Garcia and Edward Anderson had other things to do, so they couldn't come. However, Chijia and the others still came to watch the fun. When they saw Jiang Hai sitting inside the tent, they couldn't help but smile and walk over. Looking at them, Jiang Hai moved his arms and said with a smile, "Phew, I'm fine. It's just that my arms are a little sore." Originally, Jiang Hai wanted them to massage his arms. However, it was obvious that they didn't hear or deliberately missed the second half of Jiang Hai's sentence. Instead, they laughed and played together. "Well, if you're tired, take a rest. Let's go to the market over there." After ignoring Jiang Hai, Chijia said with a smile, and went to the market over there with Chiya, Delina and Marian. Of course, as Alina was always by their side. Otherwise, Jiang Hai would be worried. Originally, Jiang Hai also wanted to go to the market to take a look, but now that he was indeed a little tired, he was ready to take a rest. However, before he could lie down, another set of footsteps came from afar. "Hi, Jiang." Upon hearing this voice, Jiang Hai turned around and took a look. A trace of embarrassment flashed across his face, but he quickly concealed it. Then, he smiled unnaturally because looking at the woman in front of him, he knew that Jiang Hai wasn't that easy to deal with. "What's wrong? Don't you recognize me?" Seeing Jiang Hai's somewhat tangled gaze, the girl didn't care. She sat directly next to Jiang Hai, and then smiled at Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also touched his head. How could he not recognize her? "How is that possible, Kelly? I haven't seen you recently." Yes, the person in front of him was none other than Kelly Solon. When Jiang Hai was in the bathroom on the second floor of Hodge Circe's house, something that shouldn't have happened with her and Delia George. Later, Jiang Hai made it clear to Delia, but he couldn't say anything to Kelly. Delia had a boyfriend. Jiang Hai could use this thing as an excuse, but Kelly didn't. This made Jiang Hai a little overwhelmed, but Kelly didn't seem to care much about this relationship. After that day, although she occasionally sent some text messages to Jiang Hai, they didn't have much contact. Today, her sudden arrival caught Jiang Hai a little off guard. "What else can I do? Find a job. My dad asked me to help out at the flower shop, but I feel that I'm still young. If I don't go out and find a job, I'll be sorry for my age." With a shrug, Kelly Solon said somewhat speechlessly. Of course, there was one thing she didn't say. Children in the United States were actually somewhat rebellious. After they turned 18, most of them were unwilling to live with their parents, let alone work for them. Not only would they earn less, but they would also be mistreated. So compared to working at home, they were more willing to go out. This was the main reason why Kelly had been looking for a job. "Well, have you ever thought about continuing to study in school?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai hesitated and said to her. To be honest, Jiang Hai knew that Kelly Solon was looking for a job at the very beginning, but he didn't want to take this job. But after all, something had happened between the two, and now they were friends, so it didn't matter if he helped her find a job. "Postgraduate entrance exam?" "Hey Jiang, don't joke around. It's possible for me to take the postgraduate entrance exam, but the problem is that my major is not very good. No research team will want me." With a shrug, Kelly Solon said helplessly. The postgraduate entrance exam in the United States was indeed a good place to go. In fact, it was the same in China, but it was not so easy to take the postgraduate entrance exam in the United States. It wasn't as if you could pass the exam. You needed to participate in some research groups. You had to become a graduate student of those professors, so that you could take the exam. In China, this was more of a title, but in Boston, you really needed some research ability. "Leave this to me." Looking at Kelly Solon's appearance, Jiang Hai smiled. He would help her to the end. Since something had happened between them that shouldn't have happened, then he would help her. Then he took out his mobile phone, found a number on it, and dialed it. After the phone rang a few times, an excited voice came from the phone. "Hey, Jiang, you must know that our research has made progress, so you called, right? Haha, it's really great." Listening to this person's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes couldn't help but light up. "Research has made progress? What does this mean?" "Wait a minute, Professor Baker Gerard. I don't know what progress your research has made. Please speak slowly." Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but speak immediately. He had invested a lot of money in this research institute. If there had been no results, then Jiang Hai would be very helpless. Although this institution was first established not to make money, but to cover for his manner, the effect was still good so far. At least it blocked a lot of scholars and the like. But if this research institute could really research something, it would also be a good benefit for them. "Haha, I crossbred your cattle with the North American bison applied from Yellowstone Park. I found that there was no reproductive isolation between the two species, and the calf born was not only smarter, but also similar in size to the North American bison. but its personality was more inclined to be like the Angus cattle. However, I still don't know if this kind of cattle is suitable for raising. Everything needs to be studied first. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Professor Baker, Gerard couldn't help but speak briskly. It could be heard that he was in a good mood now. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also raised his eyebrows. A cross between Angus cattle and American bison? It sounds a bit interesting. But I don't know if this thing can be raised. But I'll leave it to Professor Baker, Gerard. Anyway, he doesn't know much about it. After congratulating Professor Baker, Gerard, he gradually calmed down. Jiang, what's the matter with you calling me? Now that Baker, Gerard was in a good mood. He also remembered that Jiang Hai didn't call because he knew about his research results. It meant that Jiang Hai was looking for him for something else. Jiang Hai was his boss. He had been researching for almost a year, but he didn't get anything, so he was still quite careful with Jiang Hai. Here's the thing. I have a friend who is a student at your B City University. Because it's not easy to find a job after graduation. She is preparing to take the postgraduate entrance exam. I just want to ask if you have any postgraduate spots left. If you do, I'll let her take the exam. Hearing Baker, Gerard's words, Jiang Hai also explained his intentions, but he was still a little careful when he said it. He was also afraid that the old professor would think too much. Generally, such intellectuals had a lot of things to do. It would be troublesome if he thought that Kelly was a spy sent by him. However, Jiang Hai was obviously thinking too much. The Americans didn't pay attention to the saying, "Don't suspect the people you use. Don't use the people you suspect." In such a research institution in the United States, there must be at least one or even several investors. This was because they had to watch these people to see if they were spending money recklessly, if they had good patents, and if there were things that were beneficial to the investors, who would be like Jiang Hai, who just invested the money and didn't care about it. Now that Jiang Hai sent someone over, it could be said that Baker, Gerard, was overjoyed. Of course, this is no problem. Just let her take the exam. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Baker, Gerard couldn't help but pat his chest and said. Hearing that he agreed, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. After making an okay gesture to Kelly Soren next to him, he exchanged a few more words with Baker, Gerard, and then hung up the phone. Really? You really helped me find the professor? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kelly Soren couldn't help but say excitedly, well, Professor Baker Gerard should be the professor of evolutionary chemistry for your college students. Now he is doing a plan for the quality of cattle and grass on the ranch for me. You can go to him these days and discuss with him. Then study hard and pass the exam. Looking at Kelly Soren, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Kelly Soren couldn't help but rush over excitedly and kiss Jiang Hai heavily on the lips. Originally, when she talked to Jiang Hai about her work, it was more of a complaint. But she didn't expect that Jiang Hai would actually help her solve this problem. To be honest, this really made her excited. Jiang, I must repay you well. I don't know if you are in the tent by the sea, Kelly said to him with watery eyes. It can be seen that she is really interested in Jiang Hai. Chapter 672. Hey boss, what are you thinking about? Looking at Jiang Hai standing on the bow, Edward Anderson couldn't help but walk out with a pipe. While smoking, he asked Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also turned his head and smiled at him. Oh, nothing. I'm just worried about how much fish there will be in a while. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile and say, Don't worry, boss. We will definitely have a bumper harvest this year. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Edward Anderson couldn't help but smile, then said with great certainty. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and continued to look at the sea in the distance. 3 days have passed since the Poseidon ritual. On that day, Jiang Hai and Kelly almost did it in the tent, cough cough. But unfortunately, it didn't happen in the end because Chia came back to deliver fruits to Jiang Hai. Fortunately, she didn't take off her clothes at that time, otherwise, she would have been caught red-handed. But even so, Chia's suspicious gaze still made Jiang Hai a little speechless. In the evening, Chia deliberately went to Jiang Hai's room and left satisfied after 2 hours. In the following days, Jiang Hai and the others were still busy, But no matter how busy they were, Jiang Hai still had to come for the first fishing trip. Jiang Hai's fishing boat was assembled in Boston. When he first assembled it, he considered the problem of fishing in the future. So Jiang Hai's fishing boat was not small. It braved the wind and waves on the sea, and it was still very stable. Don't worry, boss. If you are really worried, come in with me to take a look at the sonar. Although Jiang Hai didn't speak, he still looked a little worried. Edward Anderson suddenly said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then he felt that it would be good to take a look, so he walked into the cabin. At this time, Marin Rupert was driving the boat. In the beginning, he asked him to drive the plane and the boat. This was also what he needed to do. Next to the driver's seat, there was a sonar device. At this time, the screen was constantly jumping. Small dots appeared under the sonar. These small dots represented schools of fish. It can be seen that the fishing resources of Jiang Hai Fishery were really not ordinary. We are still in the coral reef area. Let's drive into the sea first. Looking at these small dots, Edward Anderson explained with a smile. In the past, Edward Anderson and the others went out to sea almost every day. In addition to feeding the fish and testing the water quality, they spent thousands of dollars of diesel to pave the way for today's trip. The sonar has the function of capturing and marking. Every time they cruised in the fishing ground, they would mark the fish they encountered and catch them in order. They didn't just find a place to cast the net. The types of fish, the size of the fish, and so on were all knowledge. Jiang Hai naturally didn't understand this. Although he knew that there were a lot of fish in his fishing ground, if he didn't catch them, they wouldn't be his fish. After all, these fish were very smart. It wasn't so easy to catch them. Therefore, Jiang Hai was more or less worried at this time. The boat sailed very fast. Even if Jiang Hai was worried, the fishing boat quickly left the coral reef area and entered the water. With a series of rapid sounds, Edward Anderson and the others were ready to catch the fish. Their first target was the first batch of fish that Jiang Hai ordered last year, the American red fish. When they first bought these fry from Iron Bull, these fry were only as long as an index finger and as thick as 2 fingers. But now, after a year of growth, these fish could be raised to 2 caddies in weight and 20 centimeters in length in an ordinary fishing ground. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai's fishing ground wasn't an ordinary fishing ground. These fish had absorbed Jiang Hai's spirit chi since they were young. Oh no, they were still spirit blood back then. In addition, they ate food that contained spirit chi, so their growth was quite terrifying. In Jiang Hai's eyes, these fish had basically all grown to 2 caddies, which was about 4 caddies in weight. This could be seen from the sonar. Their individual size was about 30 centimeters long. This year was not the best time to catch the fish in the soaring dragon manner. Raising these fish for 3 years before catching them was actually the right way to go. But rice has to be eaten one bite at a time. First learn how to walk, then learn how to run. There has been no income from the fishery. Although they can rely on the ranch to support them, he always felt that it was not the case. Therefore, Jiang Hai decided to fish this year. After finding these American red fish, Marin Rupert took the helm. Edward Anderson was in charge of the fishing machine, and Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian were in charge of setting the net. After everything was ready, Jiang Hai's fishing boat sailed in front of the school of fish. At Edward Anderson's command, all the fishing nets were cast into the sea. Then, Jiang Hai felt the boat sink, and the speed of the boat slowed down instantly. However, no matter how slow it was still faster than the fish swimming. On the sonar display, Jiang Hai saw those small dots enter the fishing net one by one. When almost all the fish were caught in the net, Edward Anderson also started the engine. The turbine pulled the fishing net and began to pull it back. Tommy Charles and the others also opened the entrance of the ice cabin, ready to work at any time. As the fishing net was pulled up, it looked like a big bag. The front was empty, but when the fishing net left the water, Jiang Hai and the others showed joy on their faces. They saw that the empty fishing net had turned into a huge ellipsoid about 6 meters in diameter. It looked like a water droplet, appearing in front of Jiang Hai and the others. When the fishing net was pulled to the entrance of the ice cabin, It opened. In an instant, countless American red fish fell onto the deck like rain. At this moment, the fishermen's work officially began. Because they had to pick the American red fish, they would directly slide into the ice cabin. Some other fish, as well as seaweed, would be thrown back into the sea. Looking at these fish, Jiang Hai was finally relieved. Guys, this is a gift from the sea god to us. Our boss is a man bestowed by the heavens. He gave the sea region countless fish. Looking at the fish on the ground, Edward Anderson stood up in front of the turbine and shouted loudly, "Harvest! Harvest!" Following his cry, Tommy Charles and the others followed suit. With the gradual depletion of the Atlantic fishing industry, they had not seen such a scene for a long time. Usually, when they went out to sea, they would not be able to catch so many fish in one go. With such a big net, it would be unfair if they did not catch at least half of the net's trash. Looking at these fish, to be honest, these fishermen were a little touched. For a moment, tears welled up in their eyes. But soon they sorted out their thoughts. This was because their work was not done yet. Jiang Hai hired them not to reminisce about the past. What they needed to do was to help Jiang Hai make money. This was the most important thing. As the fish were sent into the ice cabin one by one, and the seaweed and other things were thrown back into the sea, Jiang Hai and the others were relieved. Of course, Jiang Hai had been following along to help. According to the number Edward Anderson saw on the turbine, these fish weighed a total of 5 tons. Of course, after deducting the remaining cinnabar water and other miscellaneous things, the net weight should be about 4 tons. This was already a pretty good harvest. Jiang Hai's net was very large, the kind with a diameter of 10 centimeters. Small fish would be missed instantly. Generally, the finished fish weighed about 2 caddies. If they swam vertically, they could also get through if they were lucky. Only those guys that are more than 30 centimeters long will be caught in the net, and the ones that Jiang Hai caught are basically more than 40 centimeters long. According to Edward Anderson, there were about 3,000 American red fish in this shoal, and Jiang Hai caught about 2,000. The remaining 1,000 fish would grow bigger after a year of growth. Most importantly, they would leave seeds for the fishery. After dealing with these fish, Jiang Hai and the others continued to fish, galloping freely around Jiang Hai's fishery. The sonar fish finder was constantly capturing the fishing targets they had set, and Jiang Hai helped Tommy Charles to organize the fishing nets. After a while, they would throw this guy into the sea. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai's fishing boat had a total of 4 cabins. One was cold, which meant that it was filled with ice. This was used to preserve precious species of fish, such as blue spear or bluefin. The second was cold, which meant that there was no need for ice. The place to put ice was saved. The main purpose was to spray cold air inside, which could keep the fish fresh for a longer time. It was also used to preserve more advanced seafood. The last was the freezer. After being thrown in, the fish would be frozen into ice. It was generally used to preserve ordinary seafood. There was also a water storage room. This room was a separate warehouse. Its main function was to be in the water. When the boat was moving, the seawater would flow in from one end of the room and out from the other. The fish in this room could always be in contact with the seawater and ensure their survival. When Jiang Hai caught the blue spear, he used this trick. This trick was only effective for those extremely precious fish that had to be kept alive. Some people would say that the reason why these fish could survive was not because they were placed in the seawater, but because they had been swimming. Yes, this room was not small. When the seawater flowed, if the fish did not want to commit suicide and was directly hit by the current, it would need to swim continuously. But even so, the fish would be tired to death if they kept swimming like this. According to what Edward Anderson said when they were assembling it, the fish could only survive for a few days. This water silo can only allow the fish to live for one more day. Fortunately, the place where Jiang Hai sold the fish was not far away. After Jiang Hai and the others finished dealing with the fish, Marlon Rupert's voice came from the communication cabin. The second wave of fish had entered the range. Following Marlon Rupert's words, Jiang Hai and the others threw the fishing net into the sea again. After the previous incident, Jiang Hai and the others were much more relaxed this time. Sure enough, when the net came, It was another bumper harvest. They also got 5 tons of fish, but compared to the previous time, 95% of them were American redfish. It was undeniable that the fish resources on Jiang Hai's side were really rich. The most eye-catching fish in the net is the dozen or so dragonfish. This kind of fish is actually a type of grouper. It is also a type of marine predator fish. Although the size of these fish was not small when they were raised by Jiang Hai, but now they are even bigger. All the fish were more than half a meter long. Jiang Hai grabbed one and tested it. He couldn't help but be surprised. These guys seem to have eaten a lot this year. In a year, they had grown more than 100 catties, which was 50 kilograms. It was really troublesome for ordinary people to catch them. After patting this guy, Jiang Hai threw it into the freezer. The grouper's lineage was there, so it must be very valuable. In addition to the longfan, there were also American redfish, which was thrown into the freezer just now. There were also groupers which were thrown into the ice. Most importantly, they caught more than 20 salmon. It was obvious that these fishes were gathered together for no good reason. These fishes were hunting fishes, and their food was the fish that they caught in the largest quantity. Translator's note. This chapter was sponsored by Patreon. Grabbing a small silver fish that was not too long, Jiang Hai asked Edward Anderson next to him. This is a herring, right? Well, it's an Atlantic herring. It seems that these little guys were attracted by your fish farm. Looking at the small fish in Jiang Hai's hand, Edward Anderson narrowed his eyes and said with a smile. He was now calculating his income. The 2 waves of fish had a total of about 8 tons. After all, there were different types of meat. If the average price was $8 per kilogram, 8 tons would be 8,000 kilograms, and $8 per kilogram would be $64,000. It seemed that it wouldn't be a problem for him to make more than $100,000 today. Of course, the longfan, grouper, and salmon would not be priced at $8 per kilogram unless there was something wrong with their brains. Okay, deal with it. In addition to the herring, there were barracuda, mackerel, and Spanish mackerel. These fish were not raised by Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai's place was indeed a treasure. Once these fish came, they did not want to leave. Chapter 673. Fishing is a very tiring activity, at least in Jiang Hai's opinion. After 2 nets of fish, including Jiang Hai, they were already a little tired, but they were still very excited. Boss, do you know? Canadians don't catch fish as tiring as we do. Picking up a cigarette and putting it in his mouth, Tommy Charles, an old cowboy who has been to many places, couldn't help but say with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was really attracted. How do Canadians fish? Looking at him, Jiang Hai also asked as he wished. Jiang Hai knows that Americans and Canadians are born to be quite incompatible. Americans don't like Canadians. The Canadians disliked the Americans even more. It was said that Canada discriminated against the Chinese, but in some areas, they hated the Americans even more than the Chinese. Officially, the 2 countries were united, but in private, the friction between them was not small. Canadians catch fish the same way we do, but they throw the fish directly into the cold storage, instead of sorting them out like we do. That way, their workload will be much smaller. But you all know that. So when you buy seafood in Canada, you have to be careful. They might stuff half a basket of seaweed into a basket of fish. Looking at Jiang Hai, Tommy Charles couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, everyone on the boat also laughed. Of course, they all knew that this was nonsense. Because Canada was vast and sparsely populated, they didn't have that many people. Generally speaking, when they fish, they directly put the fish into the freezer, then tidy up the fish nets, and then go to the freezer to sort out the fish. This can be said to have advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that it will speed up the speed of picking fish to prevent the fish from dying after they come out of the water. The disadvantage is that picking fish in the cold storage, it feels particularly cool, especially in this season. In a burst of laughter, the 3rd net of fish was put down. He had to admit that the fishing resources in the Jiang Hai fishing ground were really rich. Although these fish had not grown to their maximum size, to be honest, they were not small. At least they could be sold. one net at a time. There was almost no shortage of fish. Almost every time the net went down, at least 5 tons of fish could be caught. Of course, there were all kinds of fish. So Jiang Hai and the others still need to sort. They were busy until noon, and Jiang Hai and the others had already caught 5 nets of fish. A total of more than 20 tons were received, of which the number of American red fish was the largest. Of course, this thing was also the most stocked at the beginning, a total of about 9 tons. This kind of fish is sold on the market for a pound of good fish. Of course, it refers to fish as big as Jiang Hai caught. It is not a problem to sell it for $10 a pound. Even if the cod grows into a monster, it is impossible for it to sell for $10 a pound. Of course, the wholesale price is definitely not that high. It is about $5 a pound, and a kilogram is about $8 to $10. This depends on the price in the market, but Jiang Hai is still very confident. He believes that not only is his fish big, but it should also taste much better than the average American red fish. Even if it is $10 a kilogram, 9 tons is $90,000. There are also 11 tons of other fish, including 1 ton of the anchovies, which is $20 a kilogram, and these fish are worth $20,000. 2 tons of grouper, which is $20 a kilogram, and these are worth $40,000. 3 tons of salmon, which is $30 a kilogram, and these are worth $90,000. There were also more than 2 tons of miscellaneous fish. Even if they weren't very valuable, they were about the same as red fish in the United States. Altogether, the fish were worth about $250,000. Although it wasn't as much as a cow, it wasn't a small sum of money either. Alright boss, it's noon. Let's get some food and rest. Looking at the time, everyone has been busy since 7 o'clock in the morning. It is almost 1 o'clock now. They were too excited about catching fish, so they have already calmed down. Edward Anderson could not help but speak to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then felt a little hungry. Alright everyone rest. Jiang Hai has never been a boss who does not empathize with his subordinates, because he knows that what Edward Anderson said must be the thoughts of these people. He did not say much, and waved his hand, telling everyone to rest and eat. Hearing Jiang Hai say eat, Tommy Charles immediately took out the stove. Then, Edward Anderson and the others did not stay idle. They went to clean up the octopus and squid that Jiang Hai just caught. Although these octopus and squid were the smallest species, even the smallest species. However, even the smallest species had changed after eating his seaweed. Not only had it become bigger, but its meat quality had also become firmer. Edward Anderson had recently become very fond of making teppanyaki squid. This was what he had learned from Little Ya. He would brush it with Mexican chili sauce. It was sweet and spicy but not too salty. It could perfectly suppress the fishy smell of the squid, but it still tasted very good. While they were cooking, Jiang Hai did not stay idle. He went to slice a few small Spanish mackerels and roasted them. This kind of fish had fewer bones and more meat. Jiang Hai liked this kind of fish very much, but the production of this kind of fish was not small, and the price was not high. Soon the things that Jiang Hai and the others were almost done. Tommy Charles was still very good at dealing with people. He first got the biggest squid and handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai did not stand on ceremony and took a big bite after receiving it. He had to admit that Jiang Hai's spiritual energy was really omnipotent. Even if it was just the taste of the squid, it was still quite good. As soon as the squid tentacles entered his mouth, the gravy instantly filled Jiang Hai's mouth. The fresh taste of the squid, coupled with the taste of the chili sauce, Jiang Hai was not bragging. With this skill, he could directly set up a roadside stall. Eating this delicious grilled squid, Jiang Hai could not help but give everyone a thumbs up. This kind of game was indeed a rare delicacy. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Edward Anderson and the others also laughed. In fact, Edward Anderson and the others had long been tired of eating things in the sea. After all, they had been doing this for half their lives. They really had no interest in the things in the sea. But to be honest, every time they ate the fish in Jiang Hai's manner, it felt really good. At least they were not tired of eating it yet. Naturally, they had to drink beer while eating barbecue. A box of ice Corona was pushed out. Jiang Hai and the others did not stand on ceremony. After opening it, they drank it. The taste of Corona was very refreshing, but to be honest, foreign beer, because of the high alcohol content, was more or less bitter. However, whether it was clear beer or Corona, it had to be accompanied by lemon. After eating a mouthful of lemon and drinking a mouthful of beer, they would feel that the beer was not bitter but sweet. Then they ate it with grilled squid and grilled mackerel. The taste was quite good. When going to sea, lemons and the like were naturally indispensable. First, it was to supplement nutrition. Second, lemons could actually happen. Of course, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai for the time being. As the sun set, Jiang Hai stood on the deck, looking at the gradually sinking sun in the distance. He also smiled. This afternoon, they caught 6 more nets. The harvest of each net was actually about the same. After 6 nets, Jiang Hai's fishing boat's cabin was filled to the brim. Not only was the ice storage full, even the ice storage was also full. Although these fish weren't too expensive, these fish alone were worth at least 500,000 yuan. This referred to the price of selling at the fishing port. If Jiang Hai had a retail channel, the price would be even higher. Jiang Hai's people did not say that they would stop after fishing once. There were many schools of fish in this area. According to Edward Anderson, they could fish every other day, and the harvest would be the same every time. They could fish until winter came in October. Then, they would look at the problem of fish in the waters and decide whether to bring them in or not. There were a total of 8 months between now and the beginning of October. According to a rough calculation, there were at least 240 days left, which was half of the time to fish. That was 120 days. Excluding storms and the like, there were still 90 days left. 90 days, $500,000 a day. That meant that Jiang Hai could earn $45 million just from these ordinary fish. According to Edward Anderson, it could only be more, not less. And this was only based on the calculation of the American redfish. After all, there were still precious fish species such as dragonfly, grouper and salmon. Jiang Hai also remembered that there were many lobsters, king crabs, spotted shrimps, large yellow croakers, and Yangtze swordfish at the bottom of the sea. There was no need to think about the Chinese bahabas. In the next few years, Jiang Hai would not touch them. In addition, he also had a batch of bluefin golden spears. If he sold these things, he would be able to earn a lot. 45 million? Haha. Adding a zero to the end was more like it. Although it still could not be compared to the price of beef. After all, beef should have a price tag. As long as ordinary cattle were raised to grade 5A, they could also be sold for the same price. However, these fish were different. No matter how delicious the American red fish was, a kilogram was still about $10. Even if it was extremely delicious, the price would still be the same. After all, the bloodline of the American red fish was still there. Just because the American red fish was better than ordinary bluefin golden spears, it did not mean that one could sell for the same price as bluefin golden spears. There were rules in the market, and the price was set by Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai was satisfied. After all, he only spent $280 million to buy this manor, and these fish could bring him more than $400 million in income in a year. After deducting the taxes, he could earn back his capital in a year. In fact, he had already earned back his capital long ago. After all, he had collected more than $1 billion from the cattle. With income, the mentality of the fishermen had changed. At least they were a lot more upright. And they could also look forward to Jiang Hai's year-end bonus during this year's Chinese New Year. It would probably be very good. Boss, we are about to reach Boston. Because Jiang Hai's house did not have a warehouse to store fish, Jiang Hai and the others were preparing to sell the fish they caught today directly at night. There was only one largest and fairest fishing company in the vicinity, Michelson Greens. So after Jiang Hai and the others decided to sell, they had already set off for Boston. Oh, I got it. Looking at the port on the sea level in the distance, Jiang Hai also responded. He couldn't help but stand up and go back to the cabin to put on his equipment. Although he was the boss, he would also help when there was a shortage of manpower. It was said that it would be very tiring to forget the mountain and set sail at the port. Jiang Hai and the others drove for more than an hour before they arrived at the port. After arriving at the port, Jiang Hai found that there were not many fishing boats here. After all, there was not much fish in Boston, and the weather was so cold now. This was really not a good season for fishing. When Jiang Hai's boat came over, many people noticed the fishing boat with the words Soaring Dragon painted on it, Huaxia. Everyone in the vicinity knew that this ship belonged to Jiang Hai. If there was a large amount of fish in the vicinity, then it could only be Jiang Hai's ship. Therefore, they wanted to see how much fish Jiang Hai had. Jiang Hai's ship was a ship that had a lot of fish. As for what kind of thoughts they harbored, no one knew. Whether or not they were preparing to do something sneaky, no one knew. But Jiang Hai was not afraid of them stealing fish, because his fish were not so easy to steal. He might be afraid of coming to a warship, but to an ordinary fishing boat, hee. Jiang Hai could only laugh. Do you think Big Fool and Roger are vegetarians? Hey, let's see who's here. Jiang Hai, it's almost time for your fishing ground to open. Are you here to sell today? After entering the port, Jiang Hai saw Michelson Green, who was collecting fish from a distance. At this time, the old man came over with a smile on his face. Your guess is really accurate. How is the current market? Hearing his words, it wasn't the first time they had dealt with each other. Jiang Hai didn't want to talk nonsense with him. They weren't friends or anything, so he directly asked him. It's on the board. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Michelson Green smiled and pointed to a sign hanging next to him. The price of common fish was written on it. The top one was codfish, Atlantic codfish. This fish is very expensive in China, but it is not worth much in the United States. 1.8 US per kilogram, followed by herring 1.85 US per kilogram, then sardines 1.9 US per kilogram, mackerel 3. For US dollars per kilogram 2.7 US per kilogram, mackerel 3.1 US per kilogram, redfish 8.6 US per kilogram for more than 40 centimeters 6.3 US per kilogram, between 40 centimeters and 30 centimeters per kilogram. Grouper, tiger spot. 20 US per kilogram, 45 US per kilogram, 20 US per kilogram, 15 US per kilogram, 28 US per kilogram, 3.6 US per kilogram, albacore tuna, 8.7 US per kilogram. Looking at the price, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. This price is a bit low. Chapter 674. Why is the price so low? Before Jiang Hai could say anything, Edward Anderson couldn't help but walk down the boat and ask Michelson Green. He was very unwilling to accept this price. He originally thought that this boat of fish could be sold for at least $500,000. But if he sold it at this price, it would be at least $50,000 less, which was something he was extremely unwilling to accept. I don't have a choice. Michelson shrugged helplessly when he heard Edward Anderson's words. You're also an old fisherman. It's impossible that you don't know. We didn't set this price. I'm also following the price in New York. This is the price set by those bastards on Wall Street. If you think it's low, then I think it's low too. Looking at Edward Anderson, Michelson Green took out a pack of cigarettes and lit one up. In the United States, there was no fixed price. In fact, there was no fixed price in China. But in China, the government would regulate these things, which was much better than in the United States. Whenever the price of something increased, such as some necessities like rice, it would only increase within a certain range. Therefore, those who raised the price were all non-necessities, such as garlic, green onions, coriander, and so on. With these years of supervision, the domestic price growth was still very reliable. This was also the best thing about the country. But in the United States, there was no such regulation. In the United States, all prices were set by those capitalists. It was the big bosses on Wall Street who were in charge of setting the price of vegetables, grains, meat, and even forage. The price was whatever they said. For example, if these guys didn't like the special 5A grade beef, they would say that from today onwards, the price of 5A grade beef would be reduced to $1 per kilogram. Then the price would really be reduced to $1 per kilogram. Of course, $1 per kilogram could only be bought after one bought it. Even if the price was reduced to this level, the people who had 5A grade beef, such as Jiang Hai, wouldn't sell it to Huaxia or Europe. It was the Americans who didn't want to eat it. It had nothing to do with them. Of course, they couldn't drop the price so ridiculously. It was possible to raise or lower the price by $1, but it was impossible for the price to drop to $1. Jiang Hai's manner basically didn't deal with these people, because he didn't sell ordinary beef. His wine was brewed by himself, and his grass didn't need to be imported. So whether these people set the price or not had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was taking the high-end route, and these people could not restrict him. However, the current price of fish made Jiang Hai a little depressed. Those damn vampires. Boss, are they for sale? Upon hearing Mickelson Green's words, Edward Anderson hesitated for a moment before asking Jiang Hai. He knew that since the price was set, it meant that he couldn't persuade Mickelson to give them more money. So now the only choice is to sell or not to sell. Jiang Hai thought for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. Although he also felt that the price was a little low, he had to sell it. He didn't have a warehouse to store these fish. And most importantly, he hadn't found the next buyer. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. Even if he sold it, he couldn't wait for it to stink. Sell it. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, Mickelson Green led his sailors to the ship. Boxes of fish were pushed out in front of the onlookers. Seeing that there were so many fish in Jiang Hai's fish farm, everyone couldn't help but gasp. They knew that Jiang Hai raised fish, but they didn't expect there to be so many of them. After pushing the fish out, Mickelson Green took out a small knife, picked up an American red fish, and then cut it open. Blood flowed out of the fish's belly in an instant. Then he took a closer look. Jiang Hai knew that he was checking the parasites and what the fish ate. When he found that the fish's stomach was full of grass seeds and other things, and there was no feed at all, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Then, he cut open a few other fish and other kinds of fish. He even sliced the meat of salmon and grouper and ate them raw. Seeing him eating raw, Jiang Hai couldn't stand it. He didn't eat raw things. However, to him, the sashimi was undoubtedly very delicious. He even smacked his lips after eating it. Hey, to be honest, the quality of the fish here is like this. Mickelson Green said while giving a thumbs up. The fish here are fresh and sweet. To be honest, the taste of the American red fish is not worse than that of the yellowfin tuna. But unfortunately, I only collect fish here. Your fish really can't be sold at a high price here. Mickelson Green sighed helplessly and said with some relief. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't have any connections. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his turn to catch these fish. It's good that you know. You got it. Weigh it. Hearing this guy's words, Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at him, and then said with a little heartache. He felt that his fish had been sold at a cheap price. Thinking about it, he really felt a little reluctant. Okay. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mickelson Green immediately commanded his men to weigh the fish. After the boxes of fish were weighed, they were sent to their warehouse. Edward Anderson and the others also recorded the weight of these people. Jiang Hai sat next to the dock with some depression, looking at the sea outside. If his fish were sold at such a cheap price, he would be a little unwilling. But how could he make these fish more valuable? Or should he raise them for another year before selling them? This was truly a troublesome matter. Just as Jiang Hai was in a daze, his phone suddenly rang. Listening to the ringtone, Jiang Hai picked it up and glanced at it. He found that the caller was none other than Walton, whom he hadn't seen since they parted in New York last time. However, she still called him every now and then. Coupled with the previous incident, the relationship between the two of them became even closer. He heard that since the last time he forced her to abdicate, Walton's position in the Walma group became more and more unbreakable. But in the past, she should be regarded as a direct descendant of her father, but now she was independent. She did not belong to any faction. As for the company, let her father and her uncle fight for it. It was precisely because of this neutrality that neither her uncle nor her father could touch her. She was very safe. This was like some countries in Europe. They had no ambition and had always been neutral. So even if the sky was broken outside, these countries would not be invaded. She was now a neutral figure in the Walmart group. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she replaced the people of other forces in Sam's Club. Now Sam's Club was owned by her. Seeing that it was her call, Jiang Hai didn't think much and picked it up directly. Why are you calling me at this time? Isn't it usually at night? Are you off work now? Picking up the phone, Jiang Hai smiled and asked Prawalton over there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton over there couldn't help laughing. When I want to get off work, who can control me? Really, but you are right. I haven't gotten off work at this time. And calling you at this time is also because of business. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Prawalton couldn't help but say with a smile. It could be seen that the conversation between her and Jiang Hai was extremely relaxed. Business. Hearing that it turned out to be because of business, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. What business can she find me for? Well, business. You are going to the New York Beef Show in April, right? Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said to Jiang Hai, yeah, this is not news. Although Jiang Hai's beef is now in short supply, he still wants to make his brand known. If one day, the Walmart group no longer buys his beef, what will he do? So he can't give the initiative to others. It's best to go out and make a name for himself. So Jiang Hai decided to go to the beef show this year. Anyway, it's not very troublesome, just a few days. Don't go to New York, go to Texas. Hearing that Jiang Hai is really going to participate, Prawalton said directly to Jiang Hai. Texas? Texas, huh? There it's not good. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said hesitantly. What's wrong? Texas is the core of the ranching industry in the United States. No, the entire world. They'll be holding the National Beef Cattle Competition in April. If your cattle can win the gold medal in this competition, your reputation will be even greater. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Prawalton couldn't help but ask with some doubts. In fact, Jiang Hai's reputation is a good thing for her. Apart from her private relationship with Jiang Hai, she is the owner of Jiang Hai's club. If the reputation of Jiang Hai Manor is known, then the brand effect of her monopolizing the beef in Jiang Hai Manor will also be reflected. At that time, she can raise the price, which is what she is most interested in. She is not satisfied with just selling Jiang Hai's beef at 5A grade. She wants to make more money, so she has to make Jiang Hai's name known. But listening to Jiang Hai's words, he doesn't seem to want to go. To be honest, I don't have a good impression of Texas. When Jiang Hai first came to the United States, he went to Texas. In his impression, the people of Texas are not very hospitable people. The proportion of white people in Texas is probably the highest among all the states in the United States. The people of Texas are quite xenophobic, and maybe because many of them are cowboys, they are very vulgar. They will often curse at other people on the street. If you dare to talk back, they will dare to hit you. Racial feelings are quite strong in this state. In this state, almost 99% of the cowboys are white. There are 1 or 2 South Americans and black people, but they are basically gathered in the ranches of black people or Latin Americans. So Jiang Hai really doesn't have a good impression of Texas. The second reason why he doesn't want to go is because of the cattle. To go there for the exhibition, you have to bring the cattle. But how do you get the cattle? Take a car? It's not very safe. Jiang Hai doesn't know how to get there by plane. He feels that it is not very reliable. In this case, how to get there is a big problem. Is that so? Actually, you don't have to worry about the first point. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton can't help but smile and say, she naturally knows Jiang Hai's temper and what the people of Texas are like, but she naturally has her reasons for letting Jiang Hai go. The National Beef Festival is in San Antonio. This time, the National Beef Competition will be held in San Antonio. You know San Antonio, the city where the NBA Spurs are located. This city is not a metropolitan area, and the market is small, but the urban area itself is not small, and the population is quite large. You said that Texans have racial discrimination. I am also very clear about it, but it also depends on the place. The people near Dallas are more serious, like Houston and San Antonio are much better. Houston is a space city, so most of the people are foreigners, and there is no such thing And the people in San Antonio are famous for their good temper. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pula Walton explained to him. As for the problem you mentioned about the cattle not being able to get there, I can help you. Our group has a lot of planes. It is not a problem to get one to send your cattle there. And those people are all professionals. Don't worry, they won't make your cattle uncomfortable. Then okay. Hearing Pra Walton's words, Jiang Hai's heart, which was still a little shaken, gradually sank. He really doesn't have any opinions, but at least he knows that Pra Walton will not harm him. Since she said there is no problem, then he also wants to make some reputation. So he decided to go to Texas in April this year. By the way, where are you now? Why is it so noisy? After finishing the business, Pra Walton remembered to ask Jiang Hai. Me, I'm selling fish in Boston. Looking at the people around him, it was really noisy. Jiang Hai said to Pra Walton. Selling fish? Did you get fish in your fishery? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton was stunned on the other side of the phone. Yeah, I've already got fish and the output is not low. Thinking of the fish in his fishery, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with a smile. Oh my God, you didn't even tell me that your fish are mine. I'll go there tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton couldn't help but shout loudly on the other side of the phone. Those fish she knows are treasures. Chapter 675. You're here. Looking at the sports car driving into his manor, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk out of the villa and say to the person in the sports car with a smile, Are you renovating your place? After parking the car in the newly repaired parking lot, Pra Walton got out of the car and looked at the road that was still under construction in the distance. She couldn't help but ask strangely. Now the parking lot was almost finished, and cars could be parked here. At present, the construction team was extending the road outward. Materials and other things were pushed everywhere, and it looked a little dilapidated. Yeah, otherwise it would be too troublesome to clear the snow in winter, so I added a cover. Hearing Pra Walton's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. At this time, the door of the front passenger seat opened, and a person who surprised Jiang Hai came out from inside. This person was none other than Cheryl Lee, the woman who once had some unclear relationship with Jiang Hai and Pra Walton. When Pra Walton was in trouble, she came to inform him. Otherwise, Jiang Hai wouldn't know. At this time, the two people came out together. After seeing Jiang Hai, he also smiled and waved at Jiang Hai. Pra Walton had always been in a hurry. After talking to Jiang Hai yesterday, Jiang Hai knew that she would come over very early today, so he deliberately didn't go out or fish. But to be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't want to sell the fish. It was really too cheap. Originally, he thought that yesterday's fish could be sold for $500,000, but in the end, it only sold for $430,000. He lost $70,000 of fish, but it wasn't cheap. Originally, Jiang Hai's fish was much more delicious than ordinary fish. If he sold it at the price of ordinary fish, it was indeed a loss. Come in. After greeting the two, Jiang Hai walked into the villa, followed by Pra Walton and Cheryl Lee. As soon as they entered the house, they were surprised to find that none of Jiang Hai's women were at home. Where are your girls? Don't say that you are now alone. They finally can't stand you? After looking back and forth and confirming that there was no one else in the villa, Pra Walton couldn't help but say with a smile, Isn't it time to pluck seeds? They all went to the greenhouse. Now the only person in the house who is free is me. Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai said to Pra Walton. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Pra Walton's eyes couldn't help but light up. Since there's no one else, that's good. Hearing that she was the only one in Jiang Hai's house, Pra Walton couldn't help but smile and walk to him. In an instant, she took off her coat and threw it aside. Then, under Jiang Hai's gaze, she took off the tight shirt under her coat, revealing the purple-red vest inside. Hey, no way, it's still daytime. Looking at Pra Walton's movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. He knew how terrifying this woman was when she went crazy. When they were in the hotel, they didn't go out for several days. Don't talk nonsense, you have so many girls to use every day. I don't have a man. Now that we meet, why don't you satisfy me? Pushing Jiang Hai to sit on the sofa, Prawalton sat directly in front of Jiang Hai. Under Jiang Hai's gaze, she directly untied her vest. Looking at the indescribable things that popped out in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Really? Two hands instantly stroked the two indescribable things that popped out. Jiang Hai asked tentatively. Of course. Hurry up, don't let me wait, they miss you very much. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton couldn't help but smile and nod. Then she picked up her hands, pressed Jiang Hai's hands, and pinched the indescribable things into different shapes. She also lowered her head and kissed Jiang Hai's mouth. As their tongues chased each other, the atmosphere in the room also changed. Good, the two lips separated. Prawalton smiled with her blurred eyes, then stood up, took off the armor on her lower body, and began to disarm Jiang Hai. Before Jiang Hai could do anything else, Cheryl Lee also came over. Her hands immediately cupped Jiang Hai's cheeks, and then her lips began to repeat Prawalton's movements. In fact, she also wanted to, but there were some things that she couldn't say. After all, she and Prawalton were Prawalton's priority. Recently, she found that Prawalton's attitude towards men and women had changed a little, although she still hated men. But she had a lot of opinions about Jiang Hai. Even in their conversations, they often talked about Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's beef, Jiang Hai's home, Jiang Hai's character, and Jiang Hai's things. Women. Just like men gathered together to talk about women, women gathered together to talk about men. Prawalton especially liked to talk about Jiang Hai, but she knew that it was impossible for her and Jiang Hai to be together. Jiang Hai was unlikely to be with her. But this didn't prevent her from liking Jiang Hai. Even since the last time she came back from New York, the things between them had become less and less, and she wasn't as active as before. But today, she seemed to have seen her former self. Not to mention Prawalton. In fact, Cheryl Lee already missed Jiang Hai very much. The last time she came, she wanted to sleep with Jiang Hai. First, it was to repay Jiang Hai's kindness for helping Prawalton. Second, it was also for her own desire. But at that time, Jiang Hai was drained by Prawalton. In a situation where she wanted to do it, but she was powerless, nothing happened between them. Now that she saw such an opportunity, she wouldn't let it go. She immediately took the initiative, and Jiang Hai felt the initiative of the two. His nerves, which were still persevering, also relaxed. For some things, once it happened once, there would be a second time, a third time, a fourth time. He, Cheryl Lee, and Prawalton had done it more than 3 or 4 times. Naturally, he was familiar with it. As the two slowly slid down and argued, Jiang Hai was also prepared. Looking at the giant beast in front of him, Prawalton licked the saliva from the corner of his mouth, and then sat on it with satisfaction. The war was about to start. Did you sell the fish yesterday? Half an hour later, Prawalton was defeated. He weakly gave up his seat and leaned in Jiang Hai's arms. Cheryl Lee took over. After resting for more than 10 minutes, Prawalton rubbed Cheryl Lee's upper body and said to Jiang Hai, "Yeah, I sold it for 430,000. While feeling Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai said to Prawalton. At the same time, his hand wrapped around her neck and kept rubbing her upper body. This feeling was really comfortable. You're really a spendthrift. According to Hua Xia's saying, you're recklessly wasting natural resources. Do you know that? Those fish of yours, I can sell them for at least $1 million. Prawalton glanced at Jiang Hai. She didn't care much about Jiang Hai's private life, but Jiang Hai was wasting money like this. She had to say something. She was a businesswoman. Money was very important to her. You didn't say you wanted it. Hiss, I can't. Jiang Hai patted Prawalton's upper body, causing some indescribable things to sway constantly. While satisfying the visual stimulation, Jiang Hai also felt the changes in Cheryl. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Cheryl also leaned on Jiang Hai's body and said weakly, I can't do it either. Hearing this, Jiang Hai carried Cheryl Lee and put her on the sofa. What happened next was needless to say. With Jiang Hai's thrusts 5 minutes later, as Jiang Hai's body arched, Cheryl also unconsciously opened her mouth wide, but she didn't cry out. After the irritation in his body subsided, Jiang Hai hugged her and lay down on the sofa again. His head rested on Prawalton's thigh. The three of them were panting loudly. Since I'm here this time, do you have time in the afternoon? I'll go see if your fish farm is rich or not. I'll see how much I can order then. Also, prepare some fish for me. I want to go back and test it. Prawalton touched the sweat on Jiang Hai's forehead and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai naturally nodded. This was what he should do. At this time, Cheryl also got up and lay down again. She cleaned up the dirty things she made. Then, the three of them went to take a bath together. Cheryl and Prawalton also specially brushed their teeth. After everything was done, it was already noon. The three of them got dressed and had lunch first. Then, Jiang Hai called Edward Anderson and told him to prepare the boat to go out to sea. Because this time it was an inspection, Jiang Hai didn't drive a small boat. Although they didn't have many people, they still drove a big boat, because only a big boat would have positioning sonar. After boarding the boat, Prawalton stayed in the steering room. Sam's Club mainly sold high-quality ingredients, so she had some understanding of these things. For example, during the New York Beef Show, her vision was very sharp. Although she wasn't the most professional expert, at least she knew everything about beef and fish. She knew more than Jiang Hai. She stared at the sonar to see the situation of the fish in Jiang Hai's manner. Feelings were feelings, business was business. Prawalton did this, and Jiang Hai also wanted her to do this. This way, he could live more freely. While she was looking at the fish, Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee ran to the deck and sat directly on the bow. They chatted while blowing the sea breeze. It seemed that since she came to ask for help last time, their relationship had become much closer. I heard that you went home a while ago. Did you just come back? Cheryl Lee touched the iron railing in front of her and said to Jiang Hai, I've been back for half a month. I don't remember the details, but I've been back for a while. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai came back in early March, and now it's almost late March. So home, it's a good word, but where is my home? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but support her sharp chin, looked at the sea in the distance and muttered to herself. Your home? If it's not Prawalton, then it's South Korea. It depends on what you think. If you want, my place can also be your home. Hearing Cheryl Lee's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, TCH, you have so many women around you. Aren't you afraid of being squeezed into scum? Cheryl Lee said to Jiang Hai with a smile. It doesn't matter. I've provoked so many women. In fact, in most people's eyes, I'm probably scum. After thinking about it, it seems that I really have too many women. It's really not good to do this. You still know. However, although you are a scumbag, you are not a bad scumbag. At least in my opinion, you are indeed not bad. You can create a sense of home for the people around you, although your love can't only be for one person. Cheryl Lee gently leaned her head on Jiang Hai's shoulder. If Jiang Hai didn't have so many messy things to do, maybe he would really be a good home. But is it really good for people like me to talk about home? With a self-deprecating smile, Cheryl Lee felt that it's not bad to be Jiang Hai's lover. If I'm too greedy, then who knows if my beautiful life will continue. Actually, if you want to go back to China, you should go. After all, you are a very important person to Prawalton. If you always have a psychological problem, it won't be good for you and her. Moreover, I also care about you, don't I? Looking at Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but tilt her head and smile gently. Yes, there are still people who care about me. Jiang, I have to admit that I really didn't expect your fishing resources to be so rich in this morning. But at this moment, Prawalton walked out of the cabin, then looked at Jiang Hai with a look of contempt. He sat down beside Jiang Hai and said to him, Is it okay? I'm a genius in the aquaculture industry. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai said with a smile, The fish here, whether it's the species or the population, are quite good. Now we have to see how the quality of the meat is. If your meat quality is good, I think I can help you spread the name of your Manners fish. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said to him mysteriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her doubtfully. Her idea? What is it? Chapter 676. Let's catch some fish. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, Prawalton smiled and patted Jiang Hai's shoulder. Then she stood up and began to instruct Edward Anderson and the others to catch fish. But it was different from yesterday. At that time, they were catching fish in schools. But now they were catching fish for inspection. Therefore, they didn't encounter any schools of fish and had already thrown the net into the sea. While running, they collected all kinds of fish. About an hour later, Edward Anderson saw that the pressure in the net was almost enough, so he used the turbine to pull the net up. As the net came ashore, countless fish appeared in front of everyone. Yesterday they caught fish for sale, so there weren't many kinds of fish. Basically, they were caught according to schools of fish. All in all, there were only about 10 types of fish. But today was different. As the net of fish was pulled up, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, "Wow!" Because there were so many fish, not in terms of quality, but in terms of quantity. The total weight of these fish was about 2 tons, but there were at least dozens of kinds of fish. There were about 20 kinds of fish from the bream family and scorpion family. These 2 kinds of fish didn't have a large population, but there were many kinds of fish. When Jiang Hai was diving, he often found these kinds of fish. These kinds of fish often formed a school of 3 or 5. Just in Jiang Hai's fish farm, there might be no less than 50 kinds of fish. For example, the bream family, such as green bream, silver bream, white-eye bream, Irish bream, softmouth bream, and so on. The scorpion family was the same. There were 50 kinds of fish in the scorpion family. Although Jiang Hai didn't have all of them, it wasn't too far off. These fishes usually wandered around. This time, Jiang Hai scooped up all the fishes. In addition to these 2 families of fish, there were other kinds of fish, such as redfish, grouper, salmon, barracuda, mackerel, and so on. There were also a lot of these fish in Jiang Hai's fishing grounds. There were also a lot of cod and haddock that were caught. In addition to fish, there were also many squid, small octopus, and herring that leaked out through the mesh. However, what surprised Jiang Hai was the presence of some small eels. These eels were something that Jiang Hai had seen before, when he was diving. However, he really hadn't noticed it before. Now that he mentioned it, Jiang Hai also noticed these fish. This is a 7-gilled eel? Looking at the eel in front of them, the others didn't have any reaction. Prawalton screamed first, and then her eyes began to shine. Hearing her scream, Tommy Charles and the others also came over. Well, it is indeed an 8-eyed eel. Our production of this thing is not too high here. I didn't expect there to be a lot. Pulling out the eel from the mesh, Tommy Charles said with some surprise. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was even more puzzled. 7-gilled eel, also known as 8-eyed eel. You will feel disgusted when you look at its mouth. But in fact, this thing is a supreme delicacy. It is mainly eaten in Europe. Legend has it that the kings of Europe died from eating this thing. But this is a real upper-class delicacy. Feeling Jiang Hai's confusion, Edward Anderson couldn't help but explain to Jiang Hai, "Is this game delicious?" Looking at the long eel, Jiang Hai said with some disbelief, "What's wrong with this eel?" It's really hard for him to imagine that this thing is a supreme delicacy. *T. This thing is not only ugly, but it also sucks blood for a living. It looks like a pig intestine with long teeth, which is really scary. When we go back in a while, I will make it for you and you will know. When Edward Anderson heard Jiang Hai's words, he couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai also felt that he should try it. He didn't mind eating this kind of thing. At this time, the fish net was loosened, and countless fish fell on the deck. Tommy Charles and the others began to classify the fish. Different fish had different prices. So naturally, the test results were different. Prawalton took a knife and began to grab the fish. Like an old fisherman, she first cut open the fish's belly to check if there were parasites inside. Then looked at the stomach to see what was inside. Then she took photos of these cut open fish and sent them to the experts. At the same time, she called people to come over and pick up the fish from Jiang Hai's fishing ground. After everything was done, everyone returned to the manor's dock. After returning to the manor, it was still very early. It was only 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Edward Anderson specially went to Jiang Hai's place to cook the fish first. In fact, it was called an eel, but it was not a fish. Because it was parasitic, it could grow to any size. This time, Jiang Hai harvested a total of 6 eels. The big one was about half a meter long, and the small one was only 20 centimeters long. Edward Anderson's method was very simple. First he cut off the head, then roasted the big one and stewed the small one. In half an hour, these 2 dishes were ready. Jiang Hai tasted it. The taste of this thing, how should he describe it? He didn't like it very much. He had eaten yellowfin fish before, and he still had them now. This thing tasted similar to yellow trout, but it was more fishy. The meat was also very soft, and there was a unique sweetness of the seafood in Jiang Hai's place. It tasted good, if not for its appearance. While eating these things, the people called by Prawalton also arrived. They drove 2 pickup trucks, and randomly loaded the fish in the 2 pickup trucks. After that they left. They would test these fish to see if they were harmful, how much nutrition they had, and whether there were parasites. Then they would set the price. Of course, the output of the fish was also one of the criteria. Now, can you tell me how I made these fish famous? Seeing the fish being taken away, Jiang Hai looked at Prawalton and asked with some doubts. He really didn't understand now. Just now he thought about it. Did Prawalton mean that he didn't care about Wall Street and forcibly raised the price? But this was impossible. Why would the people buy it? Some people would say that he was happy to sell it this way. One side was willing to hit, and the other side was willing to be hit. In the past, Jiang Hai had read a lot of farming novels in China. The protagonists in those novels all started off by planting radishes, cabbages, and so on. After they were planted, they directly ignored the market price and sold a radish for more than 100 renminbi. Then people would go crazy and fight for it. At first, it was quite cool, but later, Jiang Hai knew that it was not possible, because this was considered a way to break the law of the market. In China, it was not allowed to sell things at a high price or a low price. This was breaking the balance of the market. It was a malicious competition. Although there was no such thing in the US, a red fish cost $10 per kilogram. How could it be sold for $30 and triple the price? If it was Jiang Hai, he wouldn't buy it. Just good quality is not enough. This is different from beef. Special quality is commercial. The difference is obvious. Jiang Hai's fish is healthier, more delicious, and more nutritious. But in the US, fish farming is not popular here, so the fish are all wild. The difference between these wild fish and Jiang Hai's fish is not particularly big. At least, Jiang Hai didn't feel that the price difference was 3 times. Naturally, no one would buy it. Everything has to be advertised just like your cattle. If we didn't go to the New York Beef Show, we wouldn't have seen it. And your fish is the same. You have to go to the fishing show. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said to him with a smile. She is quite confident in Jiang Hai's fish, especially after tasting it personally. From the perspective of a businessman, selling it for 3 times the price may be a loss. Jiang Hai shouldn't have raised these red fish. He should have raised more valuable fish. If he had raised fish of grouper and above, then now Jiang Hai's income would be much higher. No matter what it is, branding is very important. If your cow wins the gold medal at the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, then we will have more reasons to raise the price of your beef cattle. It's the same for your fish. If you can win the gold medal at the fish exhibition, plus the original taste of your fish, it won't be too much to sell it for $30 a kilogram. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said with a serious face, and hearing her words, Jiang Hai also thought carefully. Fishing show. To be honest, Jiang Hai understands that if there is a beef show, there must be a fishing show. But he didn't pay attention to these before. The world's largest fishing show, WFE, was established in 1973, but it is only held once every 6 years. You won't be able to catch it this time. The companies that win awards at this exhibition will receive the attention of the world. This is inevitable, but it was just completed last year. This year, there will be no more. In addition, there are 3 major international fishing shows. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton introduced him. The largest one is the International Fishing Exhibition in Huaxia, which is the largest fishing professional trade exhibition in Asia. It is also one of the 3 most influential fishing exhibitions in the world. It is a 5-star exhibition rated by the UA Department of Commerce, but you are a bit far away. The European Seafood Exhibition will be held in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, but I think you may have some understanding of the temperament of Europeans. Many people in Europe still live in the world where they were the world's overlords, so it is estimated that you will only be there for the show. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton also introduced the fishing exhibitions to Jiang Hai, but unfortunately, there was nothing for Jiang Hai. Sister, just tell me what I can go. After listening to so much nonsense, Jiang Hai couldn't stand it, so he said to Prawalton. Hearing Jiang Hai's impatient words, Prawalton couldn't help but glare at him. This guy is really troublesome. The last one, that is the Boston Fishing Show. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said seriously. Boston Fishing Show? Is it in Boston? Hearing the name of the fishing show, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Of course it's in Boston. This fishing show was first held in 1981. It's one of the 3 major exhibitions in the world, and it's also the largest exhibition in North America. If your fish takes the lead here, then it's reasonable for us to raise the price. And it's best for you to register another brand or company, so that it's more convenient to promote your fish and your beef. Looking at Jiang Hai, Prawalton said with a serious face, and hearing her words, Jiang Hai also remembered. Going to the fishing show is inevitable. After all, this fishing show is not far from him, and he is quite confident in his fish. As long as he goes, it should not be a problem for him to get an award. He is still very confident about this. Whether it's because he is from Boston, this is a face given by the host, or the quality of his fish, there will be no problem. But as Prawalton said, setting up a company? Jiang Hai really didn't think about it, because he is very lazy and afraid of trouble. When he thought of all kinds of troubles after setting up a company, Jiang Hai felt that his head was a little big. Forget it. Let's not talk about other things first. When is the fishing show? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai decided to study this first. It's better to ask about the time first. After the spring, he will have a lot of work here. The Boston Fishing Show should be in the middle of April. After you go to Texas to attend the beef show, you can come back just in time to attend the fishing show. After thinking about it, Prawalton was not too sure. Although sometimes she would go to see if there was anything good that could be introduced to Sam's Club. These things were basically reminded by her assistant. She really can't remember the time. Jiang Hai can also understand this. Time slowly passed while the two were discussing. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. Chijia, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian also came back. When they saw Prawalton and Cheryl Lee in the villa, they were stunned because they really didn't know that they would come. Really? You didn't tell me that there were guests at home. I'll prepare dinner. The first to react was Chia. She smiled and said to Jiang Hai. Then she was going to the kitchen to prepare dinner. But Prawalton also stood up at this time. Oh, we are all sisters. You don't have to be so polite. Cheryl, let's go help. The moment Prawalton finished speaking, the atmosphere in the villa was not very good, and it was instantly silent. Chapter 677. Oh, no need, we'll do it. You've driven here for a whole day. You should take a rest first. Glancing at Prawalton, the somewhat bewildered Cheryl, and Jiang Hai, Chijia said with a serious face. Well, we'll do it. Hearing her elder sister's words, Chia, who had already walked to the door, couldn't help but smile and said. Then, she walked into the kitchen and got busy. However, Prawalton and Cheryl didn't stay idle after exchanging glances with each other. Instead, they went to clean up the bowls and chopsticks. Jiang Hai stood in the middle of the room. He felt that the atmosphere between the 4 people was undergoing a subtle change. It seemed that this change wasn't a good feeling. The hostility between the 4 people seemed to be somewhat vivid. In fact, for Prawalton, the initial relationship between her and Jiang Hai was actually just a misunderstanding. In her heart, Jiang Hai was more of a business partner. Otherwise, she wouldn't have thought of Jiang Hai when something happened to her. However, since Jiang Hai stood up for her at the Walmart Group's banquet, Prawalton's thoughts about Jiang Hai had also quietly changed. It was true that she liked women, but she was sure that Jiang Hai had unknowingly entered her heart. Now she could also say that she liked Jiang Hai. Originally, she didn't care who Jiang Hai found because she didn't care at all. But now that she cared, she would pay attention to Jiang Hai. She didn't care about Cheryl and the others. After all, they were people she once loved. Living with the people she loved, and letting the people she loved love each other, was something she could accept. But she had to consider other people. After all, her point of view was no longer the same as Jiang Hai's. Jiang Hai, what's going on? After walking to Jiang Hai's side, Daliana whispered to Jiang Hai. She was indeed a bit confused. How would I know? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say and muttered in a low voice. It's all your fault. Aren't you going to settle it? At this moment, Marian also sat over and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. What does a little brat know? Go play somewhere else. Looking at the twins, Jiang Hai threw a disdainful glance at them before shifting his gaze to the kitchen. Hopefully, there won't be any commotion tonight. Probably. TSK, how are we small? All you do is look at those big breasts of the Great Moon Empire. Why don't you pay attention to our development? Humph. I'm not going to talk to you anymore, you idiot Jiang Hai. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana patted Jiang Hai's shoulder, then stood up and went to help with Marian. But at this time Jiang Hai's attention wasn't on them. He was still paying attention to the four guys. Fortunately, nothing happened during dinner, although the atmosphere was a bit awkward. After dinner, everyone packed up their things together. Then, Chia and Chijia took the initiative to arrange 2 rooms for Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. But they asked to stay in the same room. Chia and Chijia didn't care about it. After the arrangement, Chijia went directly to Jiang Hai's room. This was also a declaration of sovereignty. At least, she had to rely on Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. Her relationship with Jiang Hai might be closer. In this regard, Jiang Hai had no other way except for a little headache. He was really weak in dealing with relationships. After returning to the room, he naturally stayed with Chijia. They took a shower first, then did some exercise and took another shower. When the two hugged each other and were ready to sleep, it was already 11 o'clock in the evening. Isn't this Prawalton a lesbian? Why? Did you take her down? Curling up in Jiang Hai's arms like a kitten, Chijia looked at Jiang Hai and said with a look of contempt. Jiang Hai was really not picky. As long as he saw something good, he would eat it. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't know how to respond. Could it be that his charm couldn't be stopped? Don't joke around. Ugh, these are all accidents. But after the accident, there will be some trouble. But between her and me, it is estimated that we will never be together. After all, the forces she represents are not the same as mine. I don't want to be annexed by the Walton family. But she told me something today that is worth considering. Looking at Chijia in front of him, Jiang Hai wisely chose to change the topic. What did she say? Hearing Jiang Hai say that Prawalton's proposal was worth considering, Chijia couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and ask him. She was really afraid that Prawalton would make some excessive demands. She asked me to set up a company or brand for the Soaring Dragon Manor, and then participate in various exhibitions. After making a name for myself, maybe I will earn more. The price of fish this year is not very good. Hearing Chijia's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chijia's first thought was to oppose. After all, this was Prawalton's proposal. As a love rival, it was inevitable for her to oppose all her proposals. But she was a highly intelligent person after all. Thinking about it, she also understood that Prawalton did this to make more money, and Jiang Hai can also make more money. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but hesitate, although she knew that Jiang Hai didn't care much about money. But it was really not good to not earn money. And most importantly, Chijia always hoped that Jiang Hai could do something serious. Instead of staying at home all day, doing some improper things with Aphrodite and other little sluts. A man should still prioritize his career. So now when she heard Jiang Hai's words, Chijia really didn't know what to say. I don't know much about these things. If you want to ask, you can ask my sister. In the end, she decided not to express her opinion. If it was some medical things, then she would naturally not decline. But now it was business things, She really didn't understand much. Asking Qi might be a good choice. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. He really didn't understand. So he picked up the phone and dialed Qi Li's number. Although it was dark in the United States now, it was noon on the other side of the ocean. Qi Li had just finished dealing with a matter. At this time, she was sitting in front of the coffee table in her office, drinking the tea that Jiang Hai brought back for the new year, while looking at the foggy sky of the capital. But the weather was not good. Qi Li's mood was still quite good. First, because the cheese company had officially stepped on the right track, and her revenge had been taken last year. Second, because the relationship between Jiang Hai and her was indeed developing in a good direction. In the case of a good relationship, the business was also quite good. No wonder Qi Li's mood was very good. In the past few days, her mood had been very good. Occasionally at night, she would think of Jiang Hai and feel a little lonely. I really wish I could just quit my job and stay by his side every day. She stretched and picked up her phone. She didn't know when, but the screen of her phone had changed to a photo of Jiang Hai. However, the image of Jiang Hai in the photo was not very good. At this time he was squatting in the snow, holding a sweet potato in his hand and eating it. Coupled with the outdoor clothes he was wearing, he did look a little tattered. Who would have thought that such a guy was worth tens of billions of yuan? This photo was taken during the New Year this year. Once, Jiang Hai was waiting for her downstairs. Maybe he was a little hungry, so he bought a roasted sweet potato and ate it there. When her car drove to the opposite side, she happened to see this scene, so she took a photo and used it as a meme. Looking at the photo of Jiang Hai pouting and frowning while eating the sweet potato, it could be said that he was not handsome at all. If it was anyone else, it would be an absolutely ugly photo. But in Qi Li's eyes, he was so cute, so handsome, so free and easy, and not pretentious at all. She had to admit that the phrase "beauty is in the eye of the beholder" was really true. Her fingertips gently stroked Jiang Hai's photo, and Qi Li looked at him so infatuatedly. But at this moment, suddenly a phone call came in. When she saw that the screen was black, Qi Li frowned subconsciously. She wanted to see who dared to disturb her time looking at Jiang Hai. But when she found out that the number was Jiang Hai's, she couldn't help but smile. "Hello, Jiang Hai." She immediately picked up the phone, and Qi Li's happy voice also passed into Jiang Hai's ears from the other side of the phone. "Hello, Qi Li, what are you doing now? Are you busy? Have you had lunch?" Listening to Qi Li's sweet voice, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask her. It could be heard that since Qi Li and Jiang Hai had a substantial relationship, the relationship between the two had indeed improved by leaps and bounds. Hearing this, Qi Jia, who was in Jiang Hai's arms, couldn't help but feel a little jealous. She turned her body and grabbed Jiang Hai's vital part with her hands. Feeling Qi Jia's movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but pinch her upper body. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Qi Jia couldn't help but soften a lot, but her hands were still moving. She looked at Jiang Hai coquettishly. She was telling Jiang Hai that she was jealous. Fortunately, the company is fully on track now, and I don't have to work overtime anymore. As for lunch, of course I ate it. Humans are made of iron, and rice is made of steel, right? Right now, I'm sitting in the office drinking coffee. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also spoke to Jiang Hai like a machine gun. Obviously, the two of them didn't feel uncomfortable talking about this kind of conversation. "Well, I'll be fine after lunch. By the way, I have something to ask you." Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then told her about the things he said to Prawalton. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li fell into contemplation. When Qi Li was contemplating, Jiang Hai didn't urge her, but quietly waited for her to reply. As for Qi Jia, at this time, she touched some of Jiang Hai's indescribable places, and found that she was already a little moved. So she quietly sneaked into Jiang Hai's bed, opened her small mouth, and put some indescribable things into her mouth. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai's body couldn't help but stiffen, but he couldn't do anything else. He had to admit that while he was on the phone with his nominal wife, his lower body was enjoying the movements of his sister-in-law. This made Jiang Hai feel a little stimulated, but he didn't know what to do. Perhaps because she felt Jiang Hai's discomfort, This encouraged Chi Jie to be arrogant. Well, I thought about it. Prawalton's proposal is actually quite good. The seafood and beef in your manor, if they are really sold at the normal market price, they are really not worth much. If you can really package them and brand them, the effect may be better. At this time, Chili didn't know Jiang Hai's situation at this time. So after thinking about it, she still said to Jiang Hai, "Hissa? Oh, I see, but how do I set up this thing?" Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also reacted, so he asked her. In this regard, Chi Li really knew much more than Jiang Hai. In fact, it's very easy to set up a company, but you have to think about where to set it up. What are the benefits of setting it up in the United States? What are the benefits of setting it up in China? And what are the benefits of setting it up in China? It also needs some procedures and so on. It's quite troublesome. Hearing Jiang Hai ask her, Chi Li's heart couldn't help but move. In fact, it was indeed more troublesome to set up a company, but it also depended on the person. Who was Jiang Hai? A person with assets of billions of dollars and tens of billions of yuan. As long as he took out a few $100 million, it would be an extremely popular investment in any peaceful country in the world. It could be said that as long as he wanted, he could set up a company. But Chi Li was thinking about another problem. Anyway, Jiang Hai didn't know much about this. If he wanted to set up a company, then she was the only person to help. If he decided to set it up in China, then he would come back, so she could meet him. If he set up a company in the United States, then she could also help him, and they could still meet. Thinking of this, Chi Li couldn't help but praise herself in her heart. She had to admit that sometimes these little tricks were very useful. Oh, if that's the case, then I'll think about it. But I feel that my chances of setting up a company in the United States are higher. After listening to Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai thought about it. Now that his foundation was in the United States, it was indeed not easy for him to go back to China to set up a company. And, okay, if you want to set it up, I'll help you take a look. By the way, Jiang Hai, I miss you. Chapter 678. I miss you too. Well, I won't delay your work any further. Tomorrow, I'll go to Moses Adams and settle the company's matters. He knows more about this than I do. If there's a need, I'll give you a call. Well, that's all for now. Listening to Chi Li's voice on the phone, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say now. He could only say a simple sentence, and then quickly made a decision. After exchanging a few words with Chi Li, Jiang Hai hung up the phone directly. At the moment when he hung up the phone, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But with this sigh of relief, his waist couldn't help but loosen, and then Chi Jie's body stiffened. After about a minute or so, Chi Jie raised her head again. After glancing at Jiang Hai, she made a swallowing motion, then lowered her body again. After cleaning up, she went to the bathroom, brushed her teeth again, and returned to bed. Jiang Hai, I miss you. Nestled in Jiang Hai's arms, Chi Jie couldn't help but imitate Chi Li's voice on the phone just now and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but slap her butt. This girl is too bad. TSK, you bad guy. Tell me, between me and my sister, who do you like more? Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi Jie raised her head and asked with a proud face. I'm not telling you. Sleep. Glancing at her, Jiang Hai hugged her sideways and closed his eyes. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't answer her question directly, Chi Jie couldn't help but secretly snort at Jiang Hai, but then she laughed again. In fact, sometimes, it was better for her that Jiang Hai didn't make a choice, because if Jiang Hai really made a choice, it would be hard to say. Nestled in Jiang Hai's arms, Chi Jie had a good sleep. When she woke up the next morning, Jiang Hai was still sleeping. After washing up, she quietly left Jiang Hai's room. At this time, she didn't change into formal clothes because there were 2 guests in the villa. Instead, she seemed to be wearing more red fruits, as if to prove that something had happened between her and Jiang Hai last night. She only wore a tulle nightdress, and the 3 indescribable places were clearly visible. When she came downstairs, she happened to see that Prawalton and the others had already woken up. At this time, the 2 were in front of the warehouse. After seeing her, they walked into the warehouse. looking at the seafood and beef that Jiang Hai raised there. The two heard footsteps and turned to look at the person who came. When they found that it was Qi Jie, they turned their heads back and continued to look at the ingredients in front of them. To be honest, I really envy you. Not only can you stay by Jiang Hai's side. Looking at the beef in front of her, Prawalton couldn't help but say with some emotion. Hearing her words, Qi Jie couldn't help but lean against the door of the warehouse and look at her like this. What's there to envy? If I remember correctly, Jiang Hai's family is far less rich than you and your family. When it comes to enjoying life, you are much better than Jiang Hai. Hearing Prawalton's words, Qi Jie said slowly, life is not only determined by money. Here, you can enjoy a lot of things that are difficult for me to enjoy. For example, the beef here, the seafood here. If I want to eat it, if it is not deducted from the company, I have to come here privately to get it. But if you want to eat it, you can eat it at any time. Another example is the pressure of life. I need to manage a big company and am busy every day, but you just need to quietly stay at home. Finally, there is Jiang Hai's body. If I want to do something with him, I have to look at your face and choose the time. But you don't need to, right? Anyone who has felt Jiang Hai's body knows that that feeling is addictive. Looking at Qi Jie in front of her, Prawalton said softly. After all, Prawalton received a different education, so she can say such words without changing her expression. But Qi Jie's face suddenly turned red, and her eyes were dodging, but she knew that this was not the time to avoid the question. If you want, you can also live in this villa. I believe that with Jiang Hai's relationship with you, he will not stop you from living here. Looking at Prawalton in front of her, Qi Jie said with a serious face. But this is impossible. You are a very smart girl, so you can see that Jiang Hai and I can't be together. Shaking her head, Prawalton glanced at Qi Jie. This little girl is really smart. This move of retreating, in order to advance, is really good. In that case, you can only be envious. Shrugging, Qi Jie said with a smile. Then, without giving Prawalton a chance to fight back, she turned and left the door of the warehouse. Looking at her back, Prawalton's eyes narrowed. This girl is really interesting. But in the blink of an eye, she took her gaze back. Although she wanted to tease her, even if it was for Jiang Hai's sake, she would definitely not do so. So she just shrugged and took her gaze back. After a while, Jiang Hai got up with a yawn. After everyone had an awkward breakfast together, Jiang Hai called Moses Adams to determine if he was in Boston. At this time, Moses Adams was really not in Boston. He was attending a legal conference in New York, but he should be back at the company before 11 o'clock. Jiang Hai drove his Tesla Roadster to Boston. He hadn't tried the autopilot or the summoning function yet. Since he bought it, he only drove it to Winthrop once, which shocked Mayor Wallace. This time he was prepared to go a long way. After confirming that the battery was sufficient, Jiang Hai drove the car on the road. The autopilot function is indeed very good. It allows Jiang Hai to drive the car on its own on the highway. He began to use his mobile phone to look up information. He looked up information about the Texas All-American Beef Cattle Competition and the Boston Fisheries Exhibition. This was the most important thing for him to do, so he must take it seriously. Now, Jiang Hai's beef could be said to have a certain degree of popularity in the northeast corner of the United States. But in the country, even Sam's Club had sold Jiang Hai's beef like crazy. But in fact, everyone didn't know that this beef was produced by Jiang Hai. But if the Texas American Beef Competition was like the one in New York, Jiang Hai's beef would crush everything. Then his reputation would really spread throughout the United States, and even Europe and China. If he had done this last year, it might have caused some unnecessary trouble, because there were more people watching him. But this time it was different. After Jiang Hai had a certain amount of chips, he was no longer a softie, but a hedgehog. If you want to catch him, then you have to be prepared to get your hands pierced. He is not an easy target to make a move on. While thinking about these two competitions, Jiang Hai went to Boston Moses Adams Lawyer Building. But when he arrived, he was stunned for a moment. Jiang Hai had been to Moses Adams Lawyer Building before. This was an office building, near the city center of Boston, with a total of 27 floors. Just like in China, The boss here rented each floor to a different company. The original Moses Adams had some reputation in Boston, but his reputation was not very prominent. He only rented about 1/3 of the 15th floor and set up his own law firm. This was also because of Jiang Hai's help. Jiang Hai remembered that when his law firm opened, Jiang Hai came. At that time, in addition to his law firm, there were 4 companies on the 15th floor: a real estate management company, a trading company, a construction company, and an advertising company. But in just a few months, almost a year, not only did he occupy the 15th floor, but he also occupied the 16th floor. Yes, standing in this office building, Jiang Hai looked at the nameplate. The 15th and 16th floors were Adams' law firm. He is really awesome. Whispering in a low voice, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh at himself. It seems that Moses Adams is also slowly getting better. Of course, he knows that Moses Adams is where he is today, and it is inseparable from him. Let's go, don't lament here. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai threw the thought that he was indeed a salted fish in the back of his mind, and then walked into the elevator. The elevator stopped on the 15th floor. As soon as Jiang Hai walked out of the elevator door, he saw the front desk of Adams' law firm. At this time, a young man in a suit, tie, and gold-rimmed glasses was signing for something at this time. The girls at the front desk were like love-struck fools at this time, looking at the man in front of them, fantasizing about what happened with this man. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know what happened. In fact, this guess was also full of malice. Jiang Hai didn't know him, but this didn't stop him. In Jiang Hai's view, a guy who dressed like this and exuded an arrogant aura was destined to not be a good person. So he directly jumped over him and looked at the front desk inside. "Hello sir, how can I help you?" Seeing Jiang Hai's head suddenly popping out from the side, the front desk here was stunned for a moment, but her good manners still made her instantly show 8 teeth, and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. And the man with glasses here, after hearing the words of the front desk, couldn't help but look back and saw Jiang Hai at a glance. He couldn't help but have some doubts. He glanced at Jiang Hai, but he didn't know who Jiang Hai was, so he didn't speak. "Oh, I'm here to look for." Seeing this scene without drama, Jiang Hai despised the man with glasses in his heart. At this time, shouldn't he be very pretentious and say, "Kid, don't you know first come, first served?" Or, "Don't you see me here? Get out." Or something like that. He didn't say it. Jiang Hai couldn't slap his face according to the routine. He hated the feeling of not being in control the most. But fortunately, Jiang Hai was not a face-slapping maniac, so he adjusted his mood and explained his purpose to the front desk. "Why are you here?" But at this moment, a voice interrupted Jiang Hai, who wanted to explain his purpose of coming. Then everyone looked at the source of the voice. Jiang Hai found a tall woman with a somewhat cold face. At this time, she was wearing a white office lady suit and appeared in front of Jiang Hai. When she saw Jiang Hai, she frowned. She didn't understand. "Miss Dale." As soon as they saw this woman, the 5 front desk here stood up at the same time, bowed respectfully to this woman, and then said to her with some fear, "Cough, I said I came to see you. Do you believe me?" Jiang Hai looked at this woman and couldn't help but smile. Yes, this woman was none other than Penelope Dale, the daughter of the second in command of the cowboy in Jiang Hai's manor, Burke Dale. Jiang Hai had met her many times, and even had the opportunity to be alone with her. But the relationship between the two didn't seem to be very good. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penelope's frown deepened, and the man with glasses next to Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his head. "Please don't joke, Mr. Jiang." Penelope heard what Jiang Hai said and couldn't help but say with some depression. In fact, Jiang Hai was not only her boss's boss, but she was also her father's boss. The relationship between the two was indeed a bit. "Penelope, do you need my help?" Seeing Penelope clearly rejected Jiang Hai's words, coupled with her frown, the man with glasses couldn't help but move to her side with an obscene smile. Some young and ignorant people also called this the smile of a warm man. He said to Penelope, but Penelope just looked back at him calmly. "No need. Also, please call me Miss Dale." "Thank you." Looking at the man beside her, Penelope calmly refused him. Hearing Penelope's words, the man with glasses also shrugged. Obviously, he was used to her attitude. Mr. Jiang Hai, you haven't explained your intention yet. Forget it, it doesn't matter. Come with me to the office. Then Penelope couldn't help but turn her head and look at Jiang Hai. But halfway through she gave up. She knew that Jiang Hai definitely wouldn't say anything good. Anyway, she was really familiar with Jiang Hai. She wasn't afraid that he would have any bad intentions, and she knew that he wouldn't make a move. She was still very clear about what kind of person Jiang Hai was. He had evil intentions but no guts, but he liked to joke. So she led Jiang Hai into her office. When Jiang Hai walked into her office, Jiang Hai seemed to hear many men's broken hearts and glasses. Chapter 679. Who is that guy? He can actually enter Miss Penelope's office. I really envy him. He can actually take the initiative to enter Miss Penelope's office. He is so happy. That guy can't be Miss Penelope's boyfriend, right? It looks like they have known each other for a long time. Oh my God, look at that guy. How could Miss Penelope fall in love with him? Don't talk nonsense or I will break up with you. Miss Penelope is my goddess. Yes, don't talk nonsense. Even if they have a relationship, it must be that he has something on Miss Penelope. It must be like this. It seems that you, the ice goddess, are still very popular here. Putting down the curtains on the window, Jiang Hai looked at the people outside who were about to riot, and couldn't help but smile and talk to Penelope. Especially the man with glasses just now, who had been standing there and staring at the office here. Jiang Hai saw clearly that his fists had been clenched, but he didn't dare to come in. He didn't know if he was afraid of Penelope or afraid of himself. After listening to Jiang Hai's remarks, Penelope just glanced at him and sat at her desk. At this time, Jiang Hai also came over and glanced at the name tag on the desk. Lawyer, Miss Penelope Daller. Oh, don't tell me you are a lawyer. You can already take on cases by yourself? Looking at Penelope, Jiang Hai said with some surprise. This is all thanks to you. After going to Huaxia with you, because I had some exchanges with the people in Huaxia. After coming back, Mr. Adams asked me to take charge of the case about Huaxia. The original internship period has passed, so I directly became a full-time employee. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penelope said to Jiang Hai without raising her head. For her, she really had to thank Jiang Hai for this matter. This is also the result of your hard work. Sitting opposite Penelope, Jiang Hai no longer had the intention to tease her when they were alone. In fact, in Jiang Hai's view, he and Burke Dollar should be of the same generation. After all, he was Burke Dollar's boss. He didn't care if Edward Anderson called him uncle. They were of the same generation, so Penelope should be his niece. Therefore, it was fine to joke around sometimes. Of course, they couldn't do it in public, but they still had to be serious in private. Are you here to look for Mr. Adams? He should be back before 11. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penelope nodded gratefully, but her eyes were still cold, and she was talking about serious matters. Well, this time I want to turn my manor into a company or brand. Then I'll go to Texas to participate in the beef show, and then come back to Boston to participate in the fishing show. Without a company's name, this product won't be so easy to sell. Hearing Penelope's words, Jiang Hai also answered seriously. He did come here for this, so there was no need to lie. Well, if you sell your beef and seafood according to the market price, it will be a loss. Although she didn't get along well with Jiang Hai, she had always been a very upright person. Not to mention that she had no enmity with Jiang Hai, only gratitude. Even if there was enmity between them, she wouldn't lie through her teeth. She had eaten Jiang Hai's beef and seafood, which could be said to be the best of their kind. If they sold it according to the market price, it would be a huge loss. The beef was still okay, because the price was there. But seafood was different. Any fish had the taste of bluefin tuna back, but it only sold for a few dollars. It was too much of a scam. So I came to ask Moses Adams. He is an expert in this area. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Penelope naturally didn't doubt it, so she quieted down and continued to look at the file in front of her. Looking at Penelope's appearance, Jiang Hai smiled and shook his head. This girl is really special. But she is not Jiang Hai's type. He still prefers to take the initiative. After all, he is not a good person to take the initiative. He is basically being counteracted. He can't control a girl who is too passive. So he sat on the sofa and picked up his mobile phone to play. After playing the game for a while, Moses Adams also came back. When he came back, Jiang Hai had been in Penelope's room for almost an hour, but the people outside were anxious. But Penelope had already said that no one could enter her office casually. Even if it was an urgent matter, it had to be called by phone. In fact, Jiang Hai didn't know that Penelope was obsessed with cleanliness. She couldn't tolerate the smell of others in her private space. Jiang Hai might be an exception. Now that Moses Adams was back, the men outside naturally seemed to have found their backbone. They immediately exaggerated with him, hoping that Moses Adams could uphold justice for them and kick Jiang Hai out. Sure enough, when he heard the person at the front desk say that Penelope called the person Mr. Jiang Hai, Moses Adams suddenly became anxious. He walked quickly to Penelope Daller's door, and then knocked on the door in front of everyone. This made the people outside very anxious. What a joke. Shouldn't he kick the door open directly at this time? Why is he knocking on the door now? These men had now begun to imagine in their minds originally, in this 1 hour, Jiang Hai and Penelope must have had some intimate relationship. The plot should be that Jiang Hai had caught her weakness, something that could make her unable to inherit her beloved job as a lawyer. Using this weakness, he took advantage of her weakness, and at the same time, asked her for money. If it was an acquaintance, Penelope's coldness just now would not be possible. Penelope's expression clearly showed that she was not willing to see him, but she was afraid of him and had to compromise. In the eyes of these people who suffered losses, got angry, drank some water, and became dirty, the plot of Jiang Hai and Penelope should be like this. At this time, in this hour, Jiang Hai should be in the room, taking advantage of Penelope. It was not easy for their backbone Moses Adams to come over. But he still knocked on the door? Was he reminding the two people in the room to get dressed? Who is it? Hearing the knock on the door, Penelope, who had been reading the file, couldn't help but look up and ask. Obviously, she didn't know the story outside. This kind of story generally happened in Japan. This kind of plot also had an English name called NTR. In layman's terms, it was Tauren. Penelope didn't know that she had been fantasized as a female character in NTR. If she knew, she would probably bite the person outside to death. It's me, is Mr. Jiang Hai here? Hearing Penelope's words, this country's Moses Adams immediately responded in a low voice. Oh, I'm here. But just as his voice fell, Jiang Hai, who happened to be sitting on the other side of the door, opened the door. Mr. Jiang Hai, I'm really sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Moses Adams's lackey mode went online in an instant. He held Jiang Hai's hand and almost rushed to kiss it. It was quite lively. It's okay. Anyway, I'm just staying at home. Your business is urgent, so it's more important. Jiang Hai was also a very easygoing person, so he didn't care about this. He waved his hand and said to him, I say, can you two go to the living room? But at this moment Penelope, who was sitting there, suddenly couldn't help but ask. Oh yes, I forgot. Mr. Jiang, let's go to the living room. The front desk will send 2 cups of green tea. As soon as he heard Penelope's words, Moses Adams immediately patted his head and said, then shouted to the front desk. After that, the two of them left Penelope's room. After the two of them left, Penelope also walked out of the room. Looking at the goddess's normal expression and unchanged attire, the men outside couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Could it be that nothing happened just now? Penelope was too lazy to care about what these people were thinking. Instead, she closed her door and walked into the office. Then she took out her wet wipes and wanted to wipe the sofa where Jiang Hai sat. But she froze for a moment. Then she put away the wet wipes again, walked back to her desk, and continued to read the files. Because she found that the place where Jiang Hai sat was not dirty. This was the first time she felt this way. At this time, Jiang Hai and Moses Adams also walked into the living room, and Jiang Hai also explained his intentions. Boss, You are finally going to set up a company. You have to know that this is what I am best at. Hearing that Jiang Hai was finally going to set up a company, Moses Adams was quite excited. He slammed the table and then said excitedly, "After we set up the company, we can make your brand's name known. With the guarantee of Walmart, we can be listed on NASDAQ and start to sell shares. Your property will go from a few billion to tens of billions. At that time, I will be the youngest billionaire. The sky is your limit. Give me 3 years, and I will operate your brand into the world's largest top food brand." Looking at Jiang Hai, it was obvious that Moses Adams was a little too excited, and his words were a little off topic. Moses, maybe you are mistaken about one thing. I am not going to be listed or anything. I am just going to set up a company and a brand to make my soaring dragon manners name known. Moreover, I don't need others to invest in me. My company naturally needs to be 100% controlled by me. Looking at Moses Adams in front of him, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and interrupted him. Was he thinking too much? Just setting up a company and a brand. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Moses Adams also woke up from his dream and then smiled a little. It seemed that Jiang Hai still had no intention of influencing the world. Just setting up a company and a brand. Yes, Jiang Hai really had no ambition. Influencing the world? Forget it. It is more important to have a good sleep. This is easy. I can help you with the company. The same goes for the brand. Just apply for a trademark registration. But boss, I am a lawyer. I can be your company's legal counsel, but I can't manage the company for you. You need to find a professional manager. Understanding Jiang Hai's meaning, Moses Adams also officially entered the role of a lawyer and said to Jiang Hai, "Well, I will study this myself. How much does the company's registration fund need?" Nodding, Jiang Hai was very clear that Moses Adams was very busy. He really did not have the time and mood to manage his own company, and Jiang Hai was not going to let him manage it. Speaking of which, this company naturally had to be handed over to someone he trusted. But among the people he trusted, there was no one with business talent. Except for Qi Li, there seemed to be no one. The rest of Qi Jie only knew medicine. Qia only knew how to cook. Feng Yunshan only knew how to mess things up. Ai Xiaoxi did not even step into society. Azalina only knew how to kill, and Aphrodite and the others had no skills except in bed. Selena Gomez was an artist, and Pra Walton was also in charge of Sam's Club. So after thinking about it, among the women around him, it seemed that only Qi Li had this talent. Then after settling things here first, he would go to Qi Li. This doesn't matter. Your company is nothing more than to promote your brand. You have long-term partners, so you don't need to find other channels and get benefits. So, hundreds of thousands can operate normally. Of course, if you have more money, you can do it faster. I just heard that you want to do it before the National Beef Show next month. So I recommend that your registration fund is 3 million. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams said seriously. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai did not say anything and directly transferred 3 million to his card. Faced with Jiang Hai's trust, Moses Adams also did business according to the rules and specially signed an entrustment agreement. Otherwise, he would not have taken Jiang Hai's $3 million. After signing with Moses Adams, Jiang Hai also took the agreement and prepared to leave. Moses Adams went directly to the Public Business Bureau in Boston to handle the affairs of Jiang Hai's company. As for Jiang Hai, under the hostile gazes of the men, he left the office and went downstairs to his car. He picked up his phone and hesitated for a moment. He decided to go home and talk to Qi Jie before calling Qi Li. If he called directly, it would be troublesome if Qi Li came over and saw Qi Jie and Qia. After all, in Qi Li's world, these two sisters were still in Miami. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.